Welcome into Tiger Talks Wrestling. I am your host, Tony. I am joined today by my co-host, Mr. Awesome, and our very special guest. Couldn't go without it.
Most definitely.
We'll dive more into Avery as the show goes along. But hello, everybody. Welcome to Tiger Talks Wrestling. Host Tony. For the first time ever, being joined by the Goobah, Tyler Aitken. Welcome to the show, man.
It's nice to be here, man.
Yeah. Like I said, we'll talk a lot more about Avery as this show goes on. But I had to put that part in there again. I know I've used it before for the episode when I had a few others on. We'll get right into the comments right away as Aaron Jones, first one to pop in there, saying hello.
That guy.
I know, right? How could you not have me and Navon's encounter in the intro? Well, I just picked one of the intros that we have, so.
Don't worry, D'Lo, you're one of my favorites.
All right. So, let's dive right in. Tyler, why don't you give me a little backstory on your wrestling origins? What first got you interested in wrestling?
Oh, this goes all the way back to, I want to say 2004, 2005. It was back whenever Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, Lesnar was first breaking in. I just remember I was at Avery's house. So Avery is actually the person who introduced me to professional wrestling. I just remember I was sitting there one day with him and I was watching TV and Eddie Guerrero versus Rey Mysterio just happened to be on TV. And I was like, you know, that masked superhero guy, he looks freaking awesome. And then of course and Eddie Guerrero, you know, he's so smooth in the ring. And I was like, you know, this is something that I think I could, you know, really get into. And then, you know, I watched it, you know, really didn't pay any attention to it. Then I was at my house and my dad had it on and Brock Lesnar was like squashing somebody. I think it might have been the time that he and Zach Gowen was doing their stuff. And I was watching that and he was like throwing around this one-legged wrestler. And I was like, okay, this is kind of interesting. You know, this is a lot better than just watching cartoons and all that stuff. So I think that's pretty much how I got into it. Right. And then of course, I started collecting the wrestling figures. That's actually how I started on YouTube. I used to make figure videos, and my I think the VTW account actually used to be WWE Micro Rocks. I had the little microaggression figures, and that kind of went.
Nice.
I mean, at the time it was kind of big, but you know, I like any kid, you grow out of that, and then that's whenever, you know, the whole thing with VTW started.
Nice. Kind of goes over part of the next question. Besides, obviously, the guys you mentioned, who would you say were some of the influences on you early on that you really enjoyed watching? And kind of like when you started, who'd you put towards your moveset, I guess you could say?
So of course, like whenever I first started out, you know, this is back whenever I was a little kid, Of course, Rey Mysterio was always like the number one guy that I kind of looked up to, and then I started looking up to like Undertaker, all that, and all that stuff. And I was really big into like authority figures. Like I was really big into like the McMahon stuff.
Right.
Um, just, but if I was to say the people that had the biggest influence on like my wrestling style or like who I'd want to be, I'd say Edge and like current day Seth Rollins. Like I mean, those are the two guys who I'm like mesmerized by. Um, of course, in the with
Right.
the gimmick that I play now, it's you don't really see either of those guys in that gimmick, but
Yeah.
I mean, it is what it is. Um,
Couldn't go wrong with those guys to have its influences, though,
yeah.
especially with things that they do. I mean, the career that Edge has had and the career that
Mhm.
Seth Rollins is currently going through.
Mhm. I mean, Edge is probably my favorite of all time. That's like if I was to have a top five, he would be number one. I'd say Taker would probably be two. Mysterio would be three. I'd say Eddie Guerrero would be four. And I'd probably have to throw in a current guy and say Seth Rollins. I've always liked Seth Rollins.
Nice. Don't blame me for that. He's one of my favorites too. All right, so you touched on it a little bit. Let's go a little more into it. The VTW origins.
Oh yeah.
Obviously, you guys started before what we're used to on YouTube era, but
Mm-hmm.
walk us through what originally led to you and Avery starting VTW, and obviously brought in Aaron, Zach,
Yeah.
Ecstatic.
Um. So basically, like I stated earlier, we started with the figure videos, and
Yeah,
that was like our starting point. And so eventually we ended up getting a trampoline, and it was just me and Avery, and we used to have two feds. We had VTW, which was Violent Trampoline Wrestling, and then we had VBW, which we filmed, and this is going to sound so bad. We filmed it in the basement on a waterbed, and it was violent bed wrestling. And I mean, if you tell anybody that now, they're gonna laugh. They're gonna be like, "What the hell were y'all
right,
doing?" But like we had like these stuffed animals that we would wrestle and stuff. Like at the time, that was cool to do stuff like
right,
that. Of
right.
course, I never said anything about it in middle school and elementary school and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
But going to the BTW stuff, we got the trampoline, and we each had 10 different characters, and it would
right,
literally be like changing a shirt or something, and then you'd be another character. Like I'd put on a headband, and I was this guy named JP, and it just basically it started out like that. And then I remember that's actually how we ran into Zach. It wasn't from
okay,
VTW. It was from VBW, because Zach and Nick, which is Ecstatic,
yeah,
um, they used to have a figure fed on YouTube, and it was it
okay,
was called it was called VBW, and so they somehow ran across me and Avery's basement wrestling videos of us wrestling stuffed animals, and our company name was VBW. And I just remember I woke up one morning and I went on on our YouTube pages, like messages thing. That's whenever you could like message people on YouTube and
right,
everything. And I just remember I went on there and I had this like nasty message, and it was from Zach and Nick's YouTube account, and they're like, "How dare you steal our Fed name? This is ours. This is our Fed name and all this stuff." And I'm just sitting there. I'm like, "What the?" And I'm like, "I'm about to fire back at these guys." And so I
right,
fired back at them or whatever. Um, little did I know that it was actually Nick. It was Ecstatic that was typing the nasty messages, and then Zach ended up messaging me, and he's like, "Hey man, I didn't mean for the hostility or whatever." He's like, "I like what you guys are, I like what your guys are doing. Well, we're 12, 10, 11, 12 years old, something around there
Yeah.
at that point."
It's
And
yeah.
and then so he noticed that Avery had on a Carolina, it was a Carolina Tar Heels jacket, which
Okay.
if you're not from North Carolina, 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be wearing a Carolina Tar Heels jacket.
Yeah.
Um, so that kind of got him wondering. He's like, are you guys from North Carolina? And I was like, yeah, we're from North Carolina. And, this was at the time where, I'm 11 years old. I'm not wanting to give out my location to anybody or anything
Right.
like
Right.
that. So then it was almost to the point where I was just like, oh yeah, I'm from, I was like, I'm from the Hickory area, which Hickory is probably like 15 minutes away from where I live. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm like, I'm from the Hickory area, and he said, oh, I'm from the Taylorsville area, and I'm like, I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, well, that's actually a lot closer to me than Hickory is, and then I'm like, oh my god, you guys live literally right up the road from me, so me and Zach and Ecstatic technically met on YouTube. We didn't go to high school together. We didn't grow up together. Well, technically we did grow up together, but
Well, yeah.
like that's technically how we met, was on YouTube. Which whenever I tell people that, I think that's like the coolest thing ever. Um,
Yeah. It's definitely surprising knowing that they live that close to you, and
yeah,
then you don't meet until just come across somebody's video on YouTube. And,
yeah.
oh,
But then after that is whenever we got introduced to Aaron. He was the the kind of the fourth guy in the group that came along,
yeah.
and he was kind of an on and off. He was kind of on and off at first, but then he started becoming more of a like a reliable piece on VTW.
Mm-hmm.
Then we had just a couple of other names, like I'm not sure if you remember like Sean Crump. He was on VTW way back in the day. Brandon Clark,
Yeah.
he used to wear like the pink VTW shirt and all that stuff. Yeah, he was one of the like core guys at one time.
Right.
Um, but yeah, there was a couple guys that like came in, done their stuff in the beginning, and life got a hold of them, and they just went their other way. Wrestling wasn't for them. Uh,
Right.
but yeah, that's technically how VTW, got started up. Oh, well, I'll bring up how I actually met Zach in person. So
Yeah.
I was actually at my local Walmart, and I was in the wrestling figure section. And this is back in the time where the deluxe aggression figures were like the best thing in the world. And
Yeah.
I remember I was going there. I was trying to find the Edge that had the camo pants. And that's
Ha.
all I wanted. That's all I wanted.
Uh-huh.
And I remember I went to our local Walmart, and I was in the wrestling figure section, and all of a sudden, there was this other kid that was there, and I'm sitting there and I'm looking at him, and he's kind of looking at me, and then I think he walks to the next aisle, and then he ends up walking back, and he looks at me, and he's like, "Are you WWE Micro Rocks?" And I'm like, yeah. And then it kind of hit me, and I'm like, this is the guy that was messaging me on YouTube.
Right.
And then I was like, are you Zach Attack 544? And he's like, yeah, that's me. And I was like, that was like a 1 in a million chance that would
Right.
ever happen. So I'm sure not a lot of people have that same story about how they meet one of their best friends.
Yeah.
but
That's for sure.
that's how I met everybody at the start, and uh, basically how things evolved into, you know, what was to come.
Right. Yeah, when talk about that in the early days of VTW. I mean, I remember you guys having so many different characters that you guys had. Slick Gibson for one.
Oh God.
Yeah, I had to bring him up.
Oh,
Quite the interesting characters that you had at the time, Tyler. Walk me through the different origins and the different developments of characters that you were playing back in the early days of VTW.
okay. Well, yeah. As you can, or as you stated, Slick Gibson was. I want to say Slick Gibson was probably one of, if not my most famous characters that wasn't Tyler.
Right.
Caught a lot of heat for a lot of different stuff for that. I actually caught heat with certain famous professional wrestler. He goes by the name Myron Reed. Um,
Oh,
uh,
cancel culture. It's a thing.
yeah,
Alrighty, here.
there's a lot of stuff that, you know, I regret Slick Gibson. Because I mean, I remember whenever I was doing the Slick Gibson stuff and with the mattress, whenever I'd carry the mattress out,
Uh-huh.
I remember catching a lot of heat with all the BEW guys, with, like, you know, with Myron Reed's crew.
Yeah.
Caught tons of heat with them. I remember I actually, a couple months ago, I went and I was scrolling through my Twitter messages, and I actually found the messages between me and Myron where we were just cussing each other out, and like, just to see where, you know, Myron is today. Like, I love Myron.
Yeah.
Just to see where he is today, you know. But you know, you had Slick Gibson. I know David Hawk was a bigger
Yeah.
name at the time. We actually tried to push him as a world champion at one point. Well, I think I tried to push him as a world champion. Everybody else was just like,
No.
I was like, no, why are you
Right.
pushing David Hawk? While I'm on the David Hawk, funny story. I was actually wrestling Avery one time as Ghost Rider,
Okay.
and because Ghost Rider was one of Avery's famous, that was probably Avery's second biggest character. And I remember we were wrestling, and it was like a Falls Count Anywhere match. I can't really remember; it's been so long ago. But we were wrestling, and I was wearing this like blazer. I was wearing a blazer with
Mhm.
basketball shorts and like a t-shirt. And we were
Nice.
wrestling, and I decided to go up the playground. I mean, the playground area is still there. You could see it in current VTW. Um,
Right.
but I went up on the slide and I jumped off to do like an elbow drop or something. And I just remember I got up and I smelt something. I didn't know what it was.
Oh.
And I was like, what is that smell? And I remember, and I'm looking at the blazer. There's cat shit all
Oh
over
no.
all over the back of the blazer. And of course, me being me, and I take the blazer off and I try rubbing the cat shit in Avery's face, uh, just to be funny, I guess.
Right.
Um, but that was one of the most infamous things that happened as David Hawk that I can remember. Um, Trying to think of what other characters I've had that really stick out. I don't know, Tony. You can refresh my brain.
It's been a while.
I was like, I'm drawing blanks on a lot of my,
It's a while. It's honest.
like,
Those are the two I do remember quite
yeah.
well. So.
I do know that, like, in 2007 VTW, there was a lot of like, I played this one character, Commissioner of Catastrophe, COC, and everybody'd call him Cock, and it was the funniest thing in the world. Um,
Ah, yes. Can't forget that one.
that right there was my main secondary. I can't believe I forgot him.
Right.
Yeah, I was the original Mephisto. If anybody
Yeah.
didn't know, that that character's been thrown around more than a French whore, I swear.
I'm gonna say how many people have been Mephisto? 'Cause I mean, I can think
Because
of a few.
I remember with Mephisto, I kind of got tired of playing him
Mhm.
because this was a point where I was like, I only want to wrestle one time during our filmings.
Right.
And so I was like, I don't feel like playing Mephisto anymore. And then so I know Chase Bridges played him at one
Yep.
point. Zach has played him. Trying to think of who else has played him. I swear Nick's probably played him at one point. Um,
Makes sense.
and this past the in current day VTW, we actually had Zach Xander play him.
Oh yes, I think I
Which
did notice that.
which if you didn't know, like
Now you know.
Mephisto's been tossed around quite a bit.
I think there's probably a couple other characters that have had the same treatment in the community. So
Yeah.
if you talk about VTW, UWE, some of the other places. Aaron says
Oh
Sean
God.
Crow played once.
Oh God. We can't forget Sean playing him. You know, you got me and you got Zach, and we're like the same. We're like this back in the day. We were the same build. You know, we're just two
Right?
skinny guys, two skinny teenagers, and then you had Sean Crump playing one time. Sean Crump was this guy who worked out all the time. Muscles were huge, chest was huge, and Sean Crump just walked out one time with the Mephisto shit on, and it was funny. It was just funny.
That it was. Everybody watching was probably like, that's definitely not the same person.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, as Slick Gibson, you teamed up with Avery at one point too. So
As Grease Willis.
yes, tag team champions at one point.
Yep. The Slick Gibson and Grease Willis stuff was probably some of my most memorable and some of the most fun things that I've ever done. Like, I know Slick Gibson's always got a lot of slack, and I've got a lot of heat for that gimmick,
Right.
because it was basically just a rib gimmick. Like, I mean, I crapped on literally everything that I saw.
Yeah. Right.
And so that got me a lot of heat. But just some of the stuff that I was allowed to say, which I was allowed to say pretty much everything that was on my mind. The most infamous Slick Gibson thing I do remember is, besides the mattress thing, was I remember it was at the beginning of a reunion rumble. I was number one. Slick Gibson was number one, and I legit spoiled the entire rumble. I legit. Chase Wakefield.
Yeah, that's right.
But yeah, I remember I legit spoiled the entire rumble, and like nobody didn't at first. They're like, he's just literally everybody that was in the rumble. I said at the start of the rumble,
Really?
I ruined all the surprises. But yeah, that was Slick Gibson in a nutshell.
Right. But at least you had fun as a character at times too.
Oh yeah.
So since we talked about the other characters, you're Tyler Aitken early on in VTW.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, we would see from there the Storm, Tyler Storm. Now back to Tyler Aitken. Walk me through the different changes going from starting as Tyler Aitken to then Tyler Storm, and then from there, now what we see.
Okay. So it first started out as just the Tyler Aitken chairman gimmick.
Yeah.
It started out with that. Because of course I was like the main guy at first. Whenever we started doing all this stuff, and Avery actually didn't become the chairman or boss man until 2014. Which then is whenever I started, I'd done the whole chairman thing. I never played a babyface. I was always a heel. I was always the heel authority figure, because that's what I liked. I liked being the Vince McMahon. yeah, I had a lot of fun doing the whole chairman gimmick. Uh, I do know that's honestly how I was in a lot of the main events because I just put myself in the main events. Uh, but I like to refer to the chairman Tyler as Red Shirt Tyler because everybody had their own different
Right.
shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was, I will say, that was my thing. I thought that we could stand out in backyard wrestling by doing different colored shirts for everybody. Like I was the red shirt, Zach was the baby blue shirt, Ecstatic was the orange shirt, Aaron
Yep.
was like the tan shirt, I think. Brandon was the pink shirt, and so like, I was like, we're all different people, but like we need to wear these shirts and stuff so people know that this is our main character.
There. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, and then fast forward to 2014. That was what I would say was our first rebranding of VTW because that's whenever we were like, oh, let's go more pro with it. Let's go more pro with it, and
Hmm.
let's have like different like gimmick names. Like let's not use our real names. Let's just use like our gimmick names. And so
Yeah.
that's whenever I went from Tyler Aitken, the chairman, to Tyler Storm because I had a fetish with dark gimmicks, and I was like, I'm gonna try to be dark. And then Zach Zach would go to Zach Daniels at that point, which to this day he's still playing Zach Daniels.
Right.
Um, Aaron, I believe Aaron started out as the blackout at that point. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, he started out as the blackout, and then Brandon at the time he started out he went to Brandon the Antidote Adams,
I
and
do remember.
I would say like to this day, if Brandon would have stuck with it and would have stuck around our group, I feel like
Hmm.
he would have actually done something good in wrestling because I mean
Yeah.
he really loved it. He really loved the idea of it, but life gets in the way. He had to move away. Um, so that was that. Um,
Gotcha.
but then so I really don't know why I switched from Storm to because I do know that after Best in the Yard 2, I was tired of doing the dark gimmick. I was like burnt out from it.
Yeah.
I was like I want to be like a Hollister model. I want to be an American. I want to be like a model. Oh, let's do a model gimmick. Which looking at me, I don't look like the surfer dude on the Hollister magazines on the Hollister website. And so I was like, I'm just gonna play like this beachy type gimmick, and I'm just gonna see where it goes.
Hmm.
So that's where illustrious Tyler Aiken started.
Yeah.
Um, regret those times. I regret those times so much. Uh, but I mean, I was just trying to play something different, and didn't necessarily work out in my favor uh,
Right.
because at from the time that I created that gimmick all the way into the Bad Sons,
Hmm.
like if people would look at that character now, they would be like, that's like mid card, like lower
Yeah.
mid card to like middle mid card at best. Um, but then fast forward to the Bad Sons, that was kind of my saving grace, and that was kind of the
Yeah.
inspiration to bring into what I'm doing now. Because
Hmm.
once I got into the Bad Sons, everybody had said for the longest time, like all my peers in VTW, all of my friends, that's involved with wrestling, everybody's like, Tyler, you should be yourself. You should play something that's you. And
Right.
yeah, I'm not a Hollister model. I'm not any of this. And I've always said, if you play the gimmick that if you play yourself, but just turn it up 1,000 notches, then you'll have the perfect gimmick.
Right.
So that's where the Bad Sons stuff happened. That was kind of my like resurgence, and the Bad Sons still to this day probably in my top 3 favorite things that I've done in wrestling.
Nice.
I've loved teaming with Nick. Me and him meshed very well as a team. And then fast forward to whenever back in 2018, whenever all the VTW drama started, and we we kind of stopped doing VTW. That was around the time that everyone started to get involved in the indies. And that's whenever I started working on the indies as Tyler Aitken. And I tried to go do like a rich guy gimmick, but then how many rich guy gimmicks have you seen on the indies?
There's probably a lot.
I mean, there's just in my area alone, I can think of 5 off the top of my head.
Yeah.
So
there's a few around here too. So.
But so I was like, it's not going to get over with anybody.
Right.
So I've done that for a while. Didn't really catch any steam, and then finally at ACCW, which is like our main indie company that we all work at. That's whenever the promoter was like, "All right, I'm going to team you and Zach up together."
Mm-hmm.
And it was just supposed to be a one-time. It was just supposed to be a one-time thing with because me and Zach was supposed to team up, and we were supposed to just put over Jamal Payne and Drew Hood just on a random show. Like we were just a thrown together tag team.
Bad Sons.
I forget. I don't forget. I remember all the Bad Sons and Change matches that we had. God, we sit there and beat the Change 2-3 times or something like that.
Quite a few.
I'm really surprised nobody's like, "Oh, Bad Sons are burying everybody." Yeah, but that's whenever we went back into we got an ACCW, and me and Zach kind of brainstormed, and we're like, we should really like take this somewhere. Like we should take the Skinny Dudes somewhere, and that's whenever we took the Skinny Dudes and we ran to the freaking moon with it. We won tons of tag titles.
Right.
I know there's probably an indie section of this podcast, so I'll explain that more on that section.
Yeah.
And then that's whenever we get into the Goobah. Because at the time, me and Zach kind of broke up as a tag team. This is whenever COVID happened.
Yeah.
Some people like at the time, I thought I was done with wrestling. At that point, I was like,
"Oh yeah."
It really didn't appeal to me as it did like back in the day. So. I will say, D'Lo really knows how to wrench in that crossface. I remember during that crossface. I mean, I was peeling at his fingers trying to get it off. I was like, "Damn, this guy wrenched this thing in."
Yeah.
But yeah, turning into from the Skinny Dudes to the Goobah. That was kind of whenever I found my niche. And I'm kind of thankful for the COVID time because it gave me a break. I got to recharge. I got to and then so shockingly, where I got the Goobah from is me and Zach had a one-on-one at an outdoor free show that ACCW done, and everyone started chanting "Goober" at me. And I'm not sure how it started. I think Zach might have called me a goober or something, and I was like, well, instead of the goober, because that doesn't really sound marketable. No. I was like, I can be the Goobah.
Yeah.
And so that's whenever me and Avery made those videos of him transforming me and giving me a gimmick. And to this day, everybody on the Indies, everyone in VTW, everybody that's like in my wrestling inner circle has told me that the Goobah is the best thing that I've came up with and done.
Nice. Which has to make you feel really good about the whole situation then for that character.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. That's on that. Well, since we're talking YouTube wrestling, backyard wrestling, whichever you want to call it, I know some people don't like that term, but we got to go into a little discussion of the first Best in the Yard, the first big crossover event in the community. Um, what originally led to you guys deciding to do the Best in the Yard, having it there in North Carolina, bringing in Corey and the guys from UWE at the time?
Um, so
And
initially, so initially, I really wasn't the I really wasn't involved in the I really wasn't involved in the creation of Best in the Yard. Thank you, Chase. Um, I wasn't really involved in like the whole creation of Best in the Yard. I think now if someone's in the live comment, they might be able to say, but I want to say that I know Cam Jackson was one of the people that was in the inner workings of making it a thing. I think
yeah,
I want to say Ecstatic was too. I think he was a big, part of pulling it all together. Um, but I do know that in the very like beginning of yeah, what Aaron said.
can't make record.
Yeah, because I mean, I know I wasn't involved in the inner workings of it or whatever, but I think I was um like whenever those guys started, that's the whole reason why the triple threat with Cam, Nick, and Corey was the main because they were the three that kind of put it together.
Yeah,
And then that was whenever I first got introduced to UWE, and I started watching some of their stuff, and so I knew that Cam was off the table, and I was like Everett Creed is because at this time I was playing Tyler Storm, and I knew that I would be able to put on some kind of story with Everett,
yeah,
and that's what led to the last man standing match at Best in the Yard between myself and Everett, um, which is probably one of my favorite Best in the Yards that there's ever been, um, just because it was the first. So
right.
that was kind of
Special.
really, yeah, that was very special.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically just how everything got led, and how because I mean I know I'm the one who chose Everett because I watched Everett. Everett probably didn't even know who I was at the time. Um, so then I chose Everett, and like they say, the rest is history. And
We'll go a little more in that. I do want to backtrack for a second, a little bit. One thing I wanted to bring up, I didn't have here. You guys, it was the first big crossover, but you guys in VTW, of course, had your own little mini crossover before that with Drew and Kevin in CCW. How did that one all come about, and how was it to bring in those guys and Joseph as well?
So I don't really remember like the whole origin of how everything got started between the two. I think it started with just a message, and they were like, "Hey, we're from North Carolina," and of course it was Drew messaging us, and since I was the main one that ran the account, I think I messaged Drew back, and I had to talk with all the other guys, and I was like, hey, do you guys want to, do a crossover show with these guys? And everybody agreed to it, which I think because at the time I thought that Joseph Everhart was like the main. I thought he was like the main guy in CCW. Like I didn't
Yeah.
know that it was like I didn't know that Drew Hood was the main guy in charge.
Right.
Like I didn't know that that's whose house they done it at, and I thought it was Joseph just by watching it.
Yeah.
And
Get that.
and so I was like, well, since we're doing the CCW and VTW thing, let's just do me and Joseph in the main. Um, heck, I don't even remember who. I think I think Joseph won that match. If I'm not mistaken. I think Joseph won that match. Um, yeah, I mean, I really enjoy I enjoyed the whole CCW and VTW thing. I think we had 3 crossover events.
Yeah, I think it was three.
The first one I wrestled Joseph Everhart, which
Mhm.
which Joseph Everhart's doing good things on the Indies right now.
Right.
Then you got on the second one, I wrestled Drew Hood for the first time. Of course, Drew's one of the most popular people in North Carolina at the moment.
Yeah.
So I mean, it definitely led him places.
Right.
Then on the third one was our Christmas Chaos special. I was actually in a triple threat match with Buck Jones and Ringo Jackson, which
Yeah.
I was in Ringo Jackson's return match because he was actually returning to wrestling in CCW at that point, and so that was his return match. He was actually a surprise. Like we didn't know that he was coming down until
Yeah.
he got out of the car, and we were like shocked. We're like, holy shit! And we're like, of course he's got to wrestle, but
Yeah.
we didn't know who he could wrestle, and so we're just like, throw him in the match with Tyler and Josh, which is Buck Jones. So
Yeah.
that's how that went.
Nice. So that, like I mentioned, was kind of build up to, of course, Drew would eventually jump over from CCW, become a big part of VTW.
Oh yeah.
Kevin as well.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of had Drew and Joseph kind of had their own circle, I guess you could say, come about at Best in the Yard 5, which we'll get into more later. But
yeah,
he definitely came around to that. While I was thinking about it, I just had to backtrack to it because I knew that was one thing I wanted to get off my mind. So, back to the Best in the Yard 1, though. What was it like to do the build-up leading into that match? I mean, I told you before we started, I was rewatching some of the matches last night and seeing the video package leading into the last man standing match between you and Ed. Mm-hmm. It was a really good put-together video package, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And then the match itself was incredible, too.
Yeah, I honestly, like, that was kind of my, like, that whole match was kind of like a blessing to me.
To unpack here.
But yeah, that match was honestly like a blessing to me because like I got to co-main this first big giant crossover event, and like
a lot of people got drafted to VTW. I like how D-Lock puts that.
I mean, everybody wanted to be in VTW at the time, which I mean, I'm grateful for.
Right.
But yeah, like as far as like the build up went, I remember the key promo. That was like the number one thing that I remember about the build up was that like Key to Creed promo, because I was trying to convince him to actually wrestle me at Best in the Yard.
Right.
And then he ended up accepting. And I mean, I honestly, the Best in the Yard 1 match with Creed, I will say that's probably my most favorite Best in the Yard match that I've had. But as far as vibe wise goes, Best in the Yard 2 takes the cake.
Right. I would personally say singles matches wise for you at Best in the Yard. I mean, technically you only had two, but even if you put in the triple threat match, the match with Ever Creed was my favorite match of the
Yeah.
singles wise for you. Anyway. Before I get into Fat Jack originally tried to draft me to UWE while drunk at a carnival. Interesting to know, Jason. Was there anything specific that you would say that kind of sticks out that you remember the most about that first match with Everett Creed at Best in the Yard 1?
I remember going into that match and like right before it, I remember just getting nervous. Like I mean, I was nervous. Like like talking about it now, it's kind of like why was I nervous? Because it's just
right.
Trampoline match in the backyard. But like at the time, I knew that we were developing something like really good. Like myself, Everett, everybody else was on the show. I knew that this was the start of something really big. And so I'm like, dang, I can't really, I can't blow this match. So I'm going into that match, I was like super nervous. But I was very proud of that match. I was proud with how everything went in the match. I do remember one of the big spots that happened was my girlfriend at the time was in the crowd, and I know Everett was like antagonizing her basically during the whole match, and she slapped Everett, which then we went back in the ring, took it home right there. But yeah, and then the curb stomp with the chair to finish that match. I mean, that's one backyard match that I remember like it was yesterday, because it was just such a big milestone for VTW, for me, for everybody on the show. Yeah, I had a lot of fun with Everett. Everett's very fun to work. Hopefully in the future in VTW, I guess to happen again.
Right. At least when you hit the Thunder Stomp, as it was called at the time, on Everett, he didn't have to wait forever for you to connect with it, unlike when he had Gerardicus Jackson at WrestleCon.
I remember that. I remember watching it live, like whenever they streamed it on YouTube. Because I never went to APW, but yeah, I remember watching it live, and that was terrible.
Yes, it was. I see clips of it every once in a while still to this day. It's like, really? We got to do a huge Zoom call podcast and call it BYW. Where are they now? That would be interesting.
It's crazy just to see the talent that was on Best in the R1 where they are now.
Right.
I mean some people on there is doing very great on the indies. Some people's not even wrestling anymore. Some people is a history teacher and a football coach.
Right.
So, I mean, it's crazy to see where people are, 8 years, like 8 years in the future. I mean, it seems like a lot longer than that. It seems like a lot longer than just 8 years that Best in the Yard 1 was.
That's what it was, 2015. All right. Won't go with the bottom of the screen, but the next thing I want to go over, like I said, I was going through some of the videos you guys got on the VTW channel last night. VTW Mania 2016, before we go into Biddy 2. Going into it, you had ran over Drew Hood a couple months beforehand, and it led to this no holds barred match that you guys had at Mania. Walk me through the whole build up to that match, the match itself. I mean, great match that you and Drew had. Of course, the finish, neither one of you could make up the 10 count, but it was definitely an incredible match to see, even watching it back.
Yeah, I will say, whenever we came up with the feud, and everything. Whenever it came time for me to actually run over Drew, I was terrified. I was terrified to run him over because I was like, I'm gonna hit him. He's gonna roll off the hood. I'm gonna run over his foot. I'm gonna break his leg. Uh, so originally I was worried as hell about that, and I think Drew was one of the main people who really wanted to push that rivalry. They wanted to like work with Tyler Storm because at the time, me and him really didn't have uh, any direction going forward.
Yeah.
Because I think this was during the height of the JHI stuff.
Yeah.
So Aaron was occupied with the Joe Cool and
They were the main event in Mini of that year.
yep. And then I know at the time Zach Daniels, D Lock, and Dustin were in the YouTube title picture.
Yep.
So then we always needed that like you. I guess it's a VTW thing. We always need that story match that's not for a
Yeah.
championship,
Right.
and it seems like one of the people who's always thrown into that story match is me. Um, so yeah, that's whenever me and Drew had the rivalry or whatever, and it was honestly interesting because I didn't reveal myself until I think it was like a couple episodes before BTW Mania itself, and like the whole hunt for Drew Hood thing. I remember I drove up to Drew's house, which Drew lives about 2.5 hours away from me. I drove up to his house and we filmed promos at his house. Uh,
Not sure what exactly Chase was referring to, but still remains true to this day.
um, but yeah, I just remember went up to Drew's house and we filmed promos uh, up there at where the
Mhm.
old CCW tramping grounds, uh, which that was fun. But yeah, the whole match with Drew was like very fun. And I remember at the very start of the match, I went and I was like, I want to get some kind of color. Like, I want you to like just start beating me up
Yeah.
to where it like busts my nose open or something like that. Because going into that match, I wanted it to be like a Lesnar and Cena match where it's just quick. Like,
Yeah.
and so that's the reason why I jumped out of the ring, and that's the reason why I jumped out of the ring and put the blood on.
I don't think he's the only person that hopes that Dustin comes back as a wrestler again at some point.
I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it.
Right? Sorry. But anyway. Yeah, it was something that we didn't see a whole lot of, I feel like, at the time. But it was interesting to see the blood at the beginning part of the match. And I mean, towards the end, you see Drew got busted open too.
Yeah. But I think if any match called for it, it was that match.
Right? At the time, definitely, that's for sure. Not surprised Aaron had to say Dustin needs to stay at home and mind his business. Before I go too much further past that, back to Biddy 1, Kevin and I, when we were doing the Ultimate Redemption review show, he said that he thought you lost to Everett Creed there, but obviously you didn't, and I didn't correct him at the time. But just mention it. You did pick up the win there. All right. So the feud obviously continued between you and Drew after that match, but don't have a whole lot to go off of from there. That was, I would say, probably the biggest match or the biggest part of that whole rivalry between you and Drew, though, there at Mania.
Oh yeah, for sure.
All right. Let's move on to Biddy 2, which I know a lot of people is favorite edition of Best in the Yard. What's Best in the Yard 2? You got Walking in the Storm this time around, as you and Jason Walker would face off. Walker, the whole storyline being that he was 5-0 against other superstars coming from other feds, if you will. Um,
Yep.
walk us through the lead up to that match, the match itself, and having a Walker actually step foot into VTW for the first time at that point.
Yeah. So going into Best in the Yard 2, uh, like there was only one guy who I wanted to wrestle, and that was Jason Walker. Because at the time, me and him had similar like character work, I'd say. Like we both had the half mask. We both had like both of us were huge ETTW fans, and we drew inspiration from Forsaken. And so that's like, of course, if I see something similar in somebody, I'm like, oh God, either they got to team up together, or oh, they got to wrestle each other.
Yeah.
So that was what I done with Jason Walker, pretty much. I do remember at the time, I didn't think that Jason Walker Charles was going to come, because I do know it was thrown around that he might not make it, and that he might not want to come down here and all this stuff. It might have been something with school, but it was thrown out that he might not be able to come down, and he ended up coming down. So I ended up getting the match that I wanted.
Right.
I know. I mean, I had a lot of fun working Charles, working Jason Walker. Like I said, that was one of my at the time dream matches, because he was one of the guys who. I mean, a lot of people don't want to admit it. He was one of the Mount Rushmore people for backyard wrestling at the time in like our community.
Yeah.
So I was like, I eventually want to wrestle everybody that's on the Mount Rushmore, and so that's how that's why I pitched to wrestle him, and I really pulled for that match a lot, because I know some people even before the event had heat with Jason Walker, and so but I was like, I want my match, like, so
Right.
he's gonna come down here, and I'll actually tell a little story about something that went down earlier in the day. So it was a triple threat, the Three Kings match. It was Aaron Jones, Everett Creed, and Corey Graves.
Right.
Well, to me, the most infamous thing that happened on that whole show happened during that match. And it was Aaron won the match. Merrick at the time was our turbulence briefcase holder, so he could cash in at any time. His music hits, he runs out, slides in the ring. We think he's going to cash in on Aaron. Kicks Corey Graves 1, 2, 3, wins the APW championship.
Right.
And I just remember, Charles was filming that match, and I just remember him. He had the camera, and he slowly closed the camera, and he put the camera down, and he started walking up the stairs to Corey. And I just remember he grabbed Corey. And he got in Corey's face. And I thought a fight was about to break out.
Right.
And then, so of course, Aaron and Ev were both like, "Hey, man, it's fine, it's okay. Like, look, like we don't have to post this. We can take this part out. Blah blah blah."
Yeah.
But he was heated, and so me being me, I go and I look at that, and I'm like, I got to wrestle him in a couple hours, and he's gonna be pissed off whenever we wrestle. But yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed the the build up to that. We done the whole Batman-esque build up for it. I remember going over to the guy who actually filmed Best in the Yard 2. His name's Dalton. We actually went over to his house and filmed that very cinematic Batman type video,
Nice.
which I really enjoyed doing. Um, but, but yeah, working Jason Walker, Charles was very fun. It was, uh, I mean, and still to this day, if Jason Walker's watching this, I don't have any heat with you. I know, like he's got something against VTW, but just know for me personally, I don't have any heat with you. Everything in the past is in the past, and that's that.
Right. All right. Um, Before I move on past Biddy 2, is there any other stories or matches that stood out in your mind or moments from Best in the Yard 1 and 2?
Oh, so I really liked that we got to have Chase Bridges debut on Biddy 2. Um, I really liked the story that Drew and Cam told about how they were kind of like the Rock and Austin of
Yeah.
backyard wrestling at the time, and they got the main event. I really enjoyed that. The Three Kings match, I love that. Uh, there's a lot of stuff from Best in the R1 and Best in the R2 is very memorable. Um,
Mm-hmm.
even the stuff with Lips from Biddy One with the Freak Show Battle Royal or something like that. I mean, I even enjoyed that. Yeah, let's not talk about Lips and Diablo Biddy 2 where Diablo fell asleep during the match.
Yeah. I've heard that one a few times. That's just like with Biddy 2. I've heard these stories several times of Navan and D-Lock running too. So.
Oh, they would. Oh my god. Yeah, that was nuts.
Right. Of course, Biddy 2 would be when you get a chance to meet Navan pretty much for the first time in BTW. Also, Jordan
Yep.
Oliver,
Mm-hmm.
who, as you mentioned, Myron Reed, big on the Indies. Jordan has his own.
Speaking of the guy you just mentioned, Jordan Oliver. Since I mean it's probably not going to happen now. We actually, well, me. I mean, I tried getting that match. I've always wanted to wrestle Jordan Oliver,
Yeah.
and on two different occasions, we both me and him like teased that match.
Right.
The first time was backstage at Best in the Yard 2, where we cut that little promo together.
Right.
Because originally that was supposed to be my Best in the Yard 3 opponent.
Oh.
We were supposed to do me and Jordan Oliver Best in the Yard 3, but at the time, that's whenever Jordan started getting really big on the indies, and
Right.
he couldn't make the date. And at the time, I was with the Bad Sons, so. And then another time we teased it at King of the Yard, whenever Ecstatic wrestled. I know Ecstatic wrestled Jordan Oliver
Right.
in one of
Yeah.
the tournament matches,
Yep.
and I remember me and him had a stare down there. So, yeah.
That was next on my list, anyways. So.
Well, that was a good segue.
Yes, it was. King of the Yard, your first time, to my knowledge, maybe only time that you have traveled out to, at the time, BEW New York. Now, of course,
That was
DEW.
that was the only time that I have ever traveled to BEW. That's the only time because we actually done a double shot. We done we done King of the Yard the first 2 days, and then on the last day we done UWE. We done Crossover Crisis.
Yeah, we'll get into that too. um, so for King of the Yard, you mentioned Ecstatic had the match with Jordan Oliver. Jordan kind of got his win back there.
Yeah.
You would have a match with Yankee the Difference Maker in the first round.
Yep.
What was it like for you to step in the ring with Yankee for the first time?
Well, Yankee was always somebody who I wanted to work, and I do know that like ever since me and Zach had a match, it was for the YouTube title. I forget what show it was on, and Yankee came out and attacked Zach, which would
Hmm.
then lead to their BD3 match.
Right.
And ever since then, I was like, like the story, tells itself right there.
Right.
Well, and then so at the time we didn't know who we were going to work whenever we went up there. Like we didn't know who was advancing on in the tournament. We didn't know who was going out first round, going out second round, who was going to the finals.
Yeah.
So the only thing that I remember is I remember they told me they're like, all right, you're going to work Yankee, but you're out first round. And I was like, it don't really bother me because I mean I'm going up there and I get to work Yankee.
Right.
Uh, Yankee's actually someone who I wouldn't mind, bringing into VTW at some point. I'm sure all of my other VTW colleagues would agree. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, that it was definitely different for me. It wasn't my first like crossover per se, cause like
Right.
or it wasn't my first time leaving VTW to go wrestle somewhere else because that was back whenever I don't know if you remember Seth Maverick and Pork Chop
Yeah.
and all them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember I traveled to Laurinburg and I wrestled there with Ecstatic.
Yeah.
So that was my first like crossover, like
Right.
leaving my turf and
TTW.
going on to someone else's.
Yeah.
But to public knowledge, that was the first time that actually a lot of VTW guys went and stepped out and you know wrestled somewhere else besides in the VTW yard.
Yeah. So, kind of might skip back a little bit. Go with Crossover Crisis before I do, though. He mentioned it, he brought it up. You guys filmed it the same weekend, pretty much.
Yep.
You and Ecstatic, as Bad Sons, had the match against Lips, of course, and Hazard,
Yep.
which they billed as KBW and UWE versus VTW instead of UWE versus VTW. Obviously, it was somebody else under the Hazard outfit that who was actually in KBW wise, but still.
Yeah.
Um, a unique match and a unique show, if you will, was Crossover Crisis.
Yeah, it was honestly like surreal the first time that we went to UWE
Mm-hmm.
because like that. Well, I know some of the guys had went there beforehand before like I went, but like getting there and walking and like seeing everything that you see on YouTube is just like surreal. So I'm like, holy crap! I've been watching these guys for like well over a year, and now I'm actually in there I'm actually on their turf and stuff like that. And I'm actually gonna be on their programming. Like everywhere that I've ever went, I've always I thought that during King of the Yard because I'm like, God, I'm at this place that I watch all the time on YouTube.
Yeah.
Um, so then, but like going to the match or whatever, that was actually the Bad Sons first. I want to say it's the Bad Sons first tag match together. If I'm not mistaken, I think it was the Bad Sons. Um, because then I think it's whenever we started. I think we done one thing in VTW before we done that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that was the first time that we actually had our like Bad Sons gear that we were doing.
Yeah.
I have a funny story after we get done talking about the match and everything about the airport. Whenever I went up there,
Well, I was going to get into that because that was one of Navon's questions actually too. So,
oh god.
so we'll get into there. But go ahead with the match and.
But yeah, like as far as the match went, I really enjoyed it. That was, of course, we got the wrestle Lips and Hazard from KBW. It was always another one of my dreams to wrestle a KBW guy, and it got to happen right there. And we'll get onto it later. Best in the Yard 3,
Right.
but I had a lot of fun with that. Like that match was one of the most fun matches that I've had because I remember this was whenever we first got the ring in VTW, and
Yeah,
so it was kind of backtracking to us to go wrestle on a trampoline again.
right.
So I remember me and Nick, we basically just buried the trampoline because I remember at the start of the match we started jumping on the trampoline, uh, and afterwards I was like, we just buried UWE by doing this. Um,
But it was a good 2 out of 3 falls match
yeah,
there. I mean, one of the things that stuck out the most to me when I was watching it back last night was ecstatic going up on top of the shed to
yeah,
the spiral tap
yeah,
onto all 3 of you pretty much on the ground.
hmm
Definitely something that sticks out in your mind. I mean, you did your dive before that, but
yeah. I think I done a flip dive
yeah,
off the trampoline.
yep,
One of the first times I've done like something like that was was there.
it was definitely interesting. I'm gonna backtrack a little bit before we go on. I see Chase has a question there too. We'll get into that question later. I want to go back to Tyler Storm before we go further into Tyler Aitken and the Bad Sons. One point in time, you were the YouTube champion, I believe it was. You had those Storm callings
Oh yeah,
where we would see so many guys come in and compete for that YouTube championship. And I think a lot of people, including Kevin, Buster Boy, if you will, mentions how much he enjoyed those open challenges and would love to see him return at some point in VTW.
yep. So like with the whole storm calling thing, at the time it was basically just the Cena US Open Challenge
Yeah,
thing. Because I know that was actually going on at the time that I decided to do the storm callings.
right.
But I think at the time we didn't have anything going on for the YouTube title, and we didn't know who I should feud with for the title. So I think I just made the executive decision. I was just like, let me just do open challenges,
Yeah,
and I could just wrestle someone different at every show. And then the belief that everybody had was, hey, this is a way that we can bring UWE guys on the channel. We can bring CCW guys on the channel. We can bring all these other different backyard wrestlers on the channel,
right.
and that they can wrestle me, and I have to go over every single time, but
Of course,
hey, it gives them exposure on
it did.
VTW.
Right.
Um, yeah, I remember I actually caught a lot of slack for so it was I think it was a Halloween Hangover taping, and we were filming stuff for the rest of the year. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I remember Big Time Mike came down, uh, Cameron Jackson, Everett, Dirty Chico. They all came down for that weekend. I didn't wrestle Everett during the storm callings, but I do remember I wrestled Big Time Mike, uh,
Yep.
Dirty Chico, and then wrestled Cam twice. And I got a funny story about Cam uh, during those storm callings. But the first big name that I wrestled with the storm callings was Big Time Mike, and that was a Halloween Hangover.
Yeah.
I remember being petrified because I mean this was I believe this was after I want to say this is after Best in the Yard too. I mean it was after one of the Best in the Yards. I can't remember which one, but I mean he annihilated Drew, and then him and Dirty DeChico had that bloodbath, and
Right.
I was like oh my god. But I mean I still wanted to say, hey, I wrestled Big Time Mike. Uh,
Yeah.
yeah, I remember he threw me around like a rag doll. I'm shocked I didn't get hurt during that match with all the stuff that we done. Uh, but
It
yeah,
just shows
I
how
had fun.
safe it is.
Yeah, I mean, everybody can say what they want about Mike. He was a very sloppy worker, but he was probably the I want to say he was the safest sloppy worker that there was. I mean, don't get me wrong, he laid all his stuff in. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
if he went to kick you, I mean, he was gonna kick you. If he went to like throw you on the ground, I mean, you were gonna take that bump. as soon as he
Yeah.
hits the ground, as soon as you hit the ground. Uh, but yeah, other than that, I had fun time working Mike. Then was Dirty DeChico, which Dirty Chico didn't get enough credit, in my opinion. Like during that run that he was doing, I think at that time was whenever the UWE was starting to push him to be the world champ. Uh,
Mhm.
but yeah, I mean, I had a lot of fun working Dirty Chico. He's actually a very like, well, to me at least. I mean, other people might say otherwise. I mean, he was very light with me. He was probably the lightest big guy that I've ever wrestled in, like I've
Nice.
ever wrestled in the yard. Um, and then the third guy that I worked during the heat of the storm callings was Cam,
Yeah.
and me and Cam wrestled on Vindication, and Cam actually beat me for the YouTube title,
Hmm.
and that was kind of, I mean, it was my idea. I was like, Cam needs to win the YouTube title from me, so then we can so then we can say that an outsider has held one of our championships before.
Right.
Um, so then me and Cam had two matches. Then we had, I think, the Christmas Chaos match that year. It was for the YouTube title because I do remember it was. I think it was a hardcore match. Um, I actually had to film that match twice
Hmm.
because I
Oh yeah.
I got hurt. I got hurt during the first part of it. It wasn't really that I got hurt, but I remember I had a migraine headache. Like I had a very bad migraine going into that match, and I was like,
Hmm.
I have to get hit with all these weapons, and I'm gonna be jostled around and thrown around, and I mean, Cam's not the lightest worker that I've ever
Yeah.
wrestled. Uh, so, I mean, Cam lays his stuff in, and I think I told Cam, I was like, hey Cam, my head's splitting. Don't hit me in the head. Of course, if you're a wrestler, how are you going to get somebody to sell a certain thing? You're going to hit them in
Yeah.
the head.
Yeah. Of
Um,
course.
so I mean, he went and he was hitting me in the head with with crap, and then I remember we went to the outside of the ring and he had one of those like stop kids at play signs. They're like it's like a plastic sign,
Uh huh.
and I remember he just cracked that thing over my back, split into two pieces, and I just remember like I felt like I was gonna pass out. I was like, and I told the referee of the match, I forget who it was, but I looked at him. I'm like, yo, I'm like, stop this match. I was like, I can't get up. I was like, my head is hurting too bad. So I went and popped me some pain pills, and then about an hour later, we went and we filmed the rest of the match.
Nice.
But yeah, that was like the storm callings, and of course, I had lips at one point. I know I wrestled Dustin. Um, I wrestled Dustin one time, and then Dustin was actually the person who beat the storm calling and uh, beat me for the YouTube title, which then Dustin would go on to the triple threat match at that year's Mania
Yeah.
um, to wrestle Zach Daniels and D-Lock.
Right. It's Dustin Plague at the time.
Yep.
All right. Interesting to hear about those. So we got that out of the way. I told you last night we had to talk a little bit about storm callings because it was brought to my attention again.
Yeah.
I honestly forgot about some of those matches, but yeah, those are fun
Yeah.
times. I do remember that. But since we were on the topic before that of crossover crisis and King of the Yard, and you mentioned it, and since Navon wanted to have the question asked, how was that first plane ride experience for you?
So this was the first time that I've ever ridden on a plane.
Mm-hmm.
Like I had never ridden on a plane for family vacations, personal stuff. Like trampoline wrestling was the thing that made me get on an airplane. Uh, so I went and I got on. So it was me and Diablo. Uh,
Uh-huh.
it was me and Diablo were we were we were plane buddies, like we were flight buddies, and because everyone else drove up there,
Okay.
I think Drew Hood, Zach Daniels, Aaron, a couple of the other guys, they all rode in the car up there. Uh,
Hmm.
well, some people know this, some people don't know this. My my car anxiety is terrible. Like if I'm not driving, um, it's just like impossible. I get car sick really easily. So it's like either I travel myself up there,
Yeah.
like driving, or I'll have to fly. Uh,
Right.
it honestly is crazy. Me and D-Lox only wrestled once, and it was on the
Yeah.
trampoline. So I'm looking forward to the day that I actually get to step in the ring with the Outlaw. Um, but going back to the plane ride, so we end up we book a flight out of Raleigh, and we all meet at Kevin Shaw's house. So it's me, Diablo, Kevin Shaw, and Jamal Payne.
Okay.
And I Jamal Payne stayed at my house the night before, and me and him rode up there together. Uh, and we were stayed at Kevin's house, and it got to the point, where we were like 2 hours before the flight, and I am just worried. I'm worried to death. I'm freaking out.
Yeah.
Um, and so we end up, we get to the airport, and so all this is new to me now. Diablo or Carlos, on the other hand, he's been on planes his entire life. Because some of his family lives in Mexico. He travels all over the United States,
Yeah.
so a plane ride for him is not that bad. Me, on the other hand, this is the first time I'm ever experiencing this. I think
Mhm.
even Kevin and Jamal Payne have ridden on airplanes before, so this is the first time for me. Uh,
Yeah.
so we end up going in there, we check in, and it gets time for us to go through like the security checks and all that stuff.
Hmm.
Well, me being dumb, I leave my laptop in my bag, and of course they tell you to take out all your electronic devices,
Yeah.
all that stuff. And so I just throw my book bag up on there because I threw my gear bag in Drew's car. So Drew had my gear, and so I just had like a book bag with all of my clothes and stuff in it that I was bringing as a carry on for the flight.
Right.
And so I throw my book bag down in the TSA thing. It goes through. Thing starts beeping. So I'm like, oh crap! Which I got that mixed up. I had my gear in my book bag, and I had my regular clothes in Drew's car.
Okay.
Uh, so I had my gear on me that I was bringing with me on the plane,
Yeah.
and so I go through that. Thing starts beeping, and of course, thing starts beeping. They got to start digging through your bag.
Right.
This was at the time where I was wearing the biker shorts with the
Hmm.
leg warmers and all this stuff. So this big jacked up TSA guy is, he's unzipping my bag and he pulls out my laptop and he's like, "Oh, this is probably what it is, but we have to go through everything in your bag." I'm like, "Okay." And so he starts pulling out my stuff. He pulls out the bads. He pulls out the elbow pads first, puts them down. Then he pulls out the biker shorts and looks at them, and I've got fur that I put on the side of them.
Right.
Pulls these out and he's looking at them and he looks at me, puts those down. Then out come the leg warmers and he's looking at these leg warmers and he's like, and he puts them down, and I swear I think I had something else in there. Well, then I think the knee pads came out after that, and he's looking at me and he's like, "I know I really shouldn't ask this, but why are you bringing this stuff with you? Like, leg warmers and these tiny boxer looking shorts, these biker shorts, and with fur on them, and
Yeah.
all this stuff. And I just look at him. I'm like, I'm a professional wrestler, and he looks at me and looks at this stuff and looks at me again, and it's just like, I'm not even gonna ask any more questions, and just starts putting all the stuff in my bag, and then he's like, here, you're good to go. And so right there, I'm already embarrassed. I'm like, God.
Right.
I'm like, God. So then comes the plane ride. So we go to where our flight is. We're waiting. Uh, that they call for our flight. We get on the airplane. Me and Carlos aren't sitting together. Which by the way, Kevin Shaw and Jamal Payne, they had an earlier flight. So their flight, they were already in New York by the time that before me and Diablo even took off.
Right.
Um, so then it gets time for us to go on the airplane. Well, I get on the airplane, find out that my seat is the first seat. It's like the cockpit, the bathroom, my seat. So I'm right at the front of the plane, and
Right.
I'm like, oh great, this is just wonderful. My anxiety's at 100, and then Carlos is sitting at the he's way
Way
back
back,
of the airplane,
of course.
and so I'm by myself. And so I'm sitting there and I'm rocking back and forth, and my anxiety just picked up. I grab my bag and I get off the airplane. Uh, I have the stewardess go on and she's chasing me up the little like I forget what they call it. It's like the hallway before you get on the
Yeah.
airplane.
Yeah.
She's like chasing me up there, and she's like, hey, are you getting off the plane? And then so I really didn't answer her. And then Carlos came off the airplane, and he grabs me, and he's like, dude, he's like, are you getting off this plane? And I'm like, dude, I was like, I don't think I can get on this plane. I was like, I was like, my
Mhm.
anxiety is through the roof. My heart's pounding
Right.
out of my chest. I was like, I don't think I can do this. And then the thing that he said that made me get on that plane was, he said, dude, all of your friends are up there waiting on you. He's like, get on this airplane. And then so as soon as he said that, I was like, I'm gonna let a lot of people down if I don't go up there. So
Right.
so I got on the airplane, I put my headphones in, I buckled my seatbelt, and I literally just looked down. And then so the stewardess came up to me and she's like, are you sure you're okay? You're not gonna have a panic attack or anything whenever the airplane starts going up.
Right.
I'm like, no, I'm fine. I was like, I'm fine. So then, and so she was like, whenever this door shuts, you can't get off this plane. I was like, that kind of sent me for a loop too. I was like, oh great. So she ends up shutting the door, and I'm sitting there, and I'm like, I'm about to be several thousand feet in the air.
Huh?
So then I mean, we end up going. Like once I got in the air, I was fine. Like
Right.
once once we got off the runway and we leveled out in the air, I was completely fine. And then I remember I pulled my laptop out and I watched that year's reunion rumble, and I got to entrant. I think this is whenever we had a 30-man rumble. I got to
Hmm.
entrant 18, and then they told us to put our electronics away and that we were about to land. And I was like, thank God. So then we
Right.
and so then we landed. And now coming back, I didn't have any issues because I had, I guess, conquered my fear of flying.
Yeah.
But that was the infamous Tyler Aitken um, flight story.
And Chase Wakefield says I need to take Tyler on another flight.
We'll see about that.
Right.
I wouldn't be. I mean, if the right thing called for it, I'll get on another airplane.
Situation rose. All right. I'll get to more of his questions later. They don't have to be right now. So let's move on from that to VTW Mania 2017. We were discussing it a little bit during our Ultimate Redemption review show. We got to go into more of it now. You and Ecstatic, of course, against the Mafia, Aaron Jones and Chase Bridges. TLC match to crown inaugural, well, I guess you could call it inaugural, the new tag team champions, anyways. What was that match like for you, the build up to it, everything that happened during that match, the implosion of the Mafia, etc.?
I really enjoyed that match because that was the match that kind of made the Bad Sons. If I was gonna say if any match made the Bad Sons, that was the match that did. I remember I done a tope off the ladder, almost landed on my neck, but thankfully Aaron and Chase caught me in the right way to where I wouldn't land on my neck. But yeah, that was kind of the match that made the Bad Sons. And I really enjoyed it. It seems like me and Aaron can't get away from each other on our big shows.
Right.
But yeah, I really enjoyed working with those guys. I think the tag team championship, like the VTW tag team titles, was a very big missed opportunity. Because there was times where I felt like we should have dropped the championships to people.
Yeah.
But we didn't. And then, like going on to future manias and stuff like that, we held the championships for over a year.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, that match definitely made a mark on the Bad Sons. And of course, with the Mafia turning on each other right there, and then Chase and Aaron starting their rivalry. Then for me and Nick to go on and do our tag stuff, it was a good segue into everything. And speaking of that Mania, I will say that was by far my favorite VTW Mania as a whole.
Nice. Yeah, early on in that match, Chase Bridges, of course, was kind of responsible for breaking one of the ladders, of course, as well. So with a little help, and then tries using that same ladder to climb to get to titles, and of course, Aaron just about breaking the other ladder, trying to climb to get the other titles at another spot in that match. But
it was definitely a fun match. That was one of my favorite Bad Sons matches.
Nice. Of course, Aaron turning on Chase, and then you and Ecstatic putting Chase through the makeshift table, if you will, before grabbing the titles. Mr. Awesome says VTW Mania 2017 was pure VTW energy. It was at the time.
Like I said, that I think just that show overall, like the whole card that was laid out, because you had the Fatal 4-Way match for the World Championship. I want to say, was it D-Lock and Zach for the YouTube Championship there? Or I might be thinking of something else.
Let me double check here.
I'm not too sure about.
Let's see, I didn't have time to watch all of it.
But I do.
That was where D'Lo debuted against Mephisto.
Yep.
Joe Cool and Dante wrestled each other. Yep, D-Lock defended the YouTube title against Zach.
Yep, that's what I figured. I mean, that was just such an overall great show, and like going into Mania 2018.
We'll get more into that here soon. But of course, also on that card, you had Avery going up against Wolf Stalo. Can't forget that match. The comedy match, if you will, from VTW Mania 2017.
Yeah.
But it was right before the main event, so it was a good spot to have that match when they did do it there. Yes, Mr. Awesome mentioning the 4-way for the World Heavyweight title between Drew, Dustin, Jamal, and Kevin. The main event. And you seen Kevin and Jamal getting into each other's faces after the match was over.
That was kind of our way to be like, okay, the main event of our big show of the year doesn't need an original in it, and that was why we done the 4-way with Drew, Dustin, Jamal, and Kevin. It's because we're like, hey, these are the guys to look out for. These
Right.
are our fresh, brand new guys that are VTW now. So instead of throwing me, Ecstatic, Aaron, or Zach in the picture,
Mm-hmm.
you know,
Put those
have
guys there.
have a 4-way with like the new like the new breed OGs.
Yeah. Great show, that's for sure. Move on from there. Of course, not long after Mania, we would see Best in the Yard 3.
Yep.
After you get through the pre-show, the show event kicks off with you and Ecstatic coming out on a floaty device. Quite the entrance.
There was some heat with that too.
Was there now? I mean, you can get your own little volleyball, well, not volleyball, but beach ball incident during the beginning parts of that match, and D-Lock has to kick it out of the ring. Or Little Debbie, sorry, but still. But walk me through going into Biddy 3, what the process was, and then you finding out, you guys getting it so that you're facing AK-47, and I think we all know who the person is under the mask, but the Bama Kid, anyways.
Yeah. That match was that was one of my favorite matches. That like there's so many like favorite Bad Sons matches that I've got. But like as far as like star power, that was the match that was like, okay, we're facing some top dogs right now. Because I mean, we all know Cage and AK-47. They're from KBW, and they're like the two main guys from KBW,
right?
Which was at the time the most popular backyard wrestling fed on YouTube.
Yes.
And then of course the Bama Kid. Everybody's always wondered who the Bama Kid is and who's under the mask, and it's Chase Bridges, the Bama Kid, and all that stuff. But I mean, I'm not really in character, but I mean, as everybody knows, the current AEW superstar Fuego del Sol was the Bama Kid,
right?
And so that was a great honor for me, because this at the time, this was right after he got done wrestling Chavo, I think Chavo Guerrero.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
So I was like, dang, I'm working somebody who's wrestling WWE stars.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, in that match, I was nervous about that match. That's one thing about me. I get super nervous before I wrestle, especially wrestling those two guys. And since it was like kind of an open challenge type deal, it really didn't have a lot of build. But I do remember the promo that me and Ecstatic cut, where I do remember our summer extravaganza promo.
Yeah.
Which was pretty hilarious.
It was definitely, I would say, probably my favorite match of yours when it comes to Best in the Yard shows, but not just because of the other two guys that were in there. I just felt like it helped that those two were learning the indie stuff as well. I mean, Bama Kid more so than AK at that point in time, but still, you kind of see it more and see the continuity, I guess, in a way, in that match. So that one definitely sticks out to me. And it was fun watching it back again. It'd been a while since I've seen that match, but I watched it back again last night, and it's still a really good match. I mean, technically the illegal person got pinned at the end of it, but hey, it is what it is, right?
Yeah, we were just getting started out, and we didn't really know any better.
Right. what other memories do you have from Best in the Yard 3? I mean, it was a loaded show. You had Drew's final, or excuse me, you had Mike's final match there. Drew had a big match with Nova, and
Mm-hmm.
so many big things that happened at Best in the Yard
Yeah,
3.
I was gonna say the Mike stuff really sticks out to me. Because I mean, it was to be honest, I mean, it was very emotional after that match, and
Uh,
I remember we were in a church recording
yeah.
that. That's the reason why we had all the tarps and everything out for Mike and Rick's match.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and then of course the whole Zach and Yankee match. Uh,
Right.
uh, in a way, I kind of hated the placement of some stuff during this show because like I really feel sorry for Zach and Yankee because I mean
Right.
they really worked their asses off, but it seemed that a lot of people tuned out after they saw Cage versus Cam,
Yeah.
which that was kind of like it was a thing that everybody talked about beforehand. We're like, okay, Cage is the biggest backyard wrestler at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and we're gonna have him in the middle of the show. Uh, so that's just something that we were thinking about. We're like, but, but yeah.
So before we move past video 3, though, you said there guys got a little bit of heat for your entrance there. There must be a story behind that.
Um, so at the time, and like of course, everybody's cool now. But at the time, we were trying to think. We were trying to think of something cool for our entrance, and we're like, okay, well, we got all these floaties.
Mm-hmm.
What if somebody just drags us out on a floaty? And then so like I think at the time we were going to get like two guys to pull us out, and we're like, no, let's have girls do it
Mm-hmm.
because that's like very Bad Sons esque. Is if we're gonna
Yeah.
have two girls struggle to pull us to the ring. Uh, which the girls we ended up choosing was Rick Rios and TJ Zakara's girlfriend. Uh,
Nice.
and so we ended up doing that. I think they whenever we asked them, I think they said that they were cool with it, but they really weren't.
Oh yeah.
And then I remember I had a fidget spinner, and
Mm-hmm.
I was had that fidget spinner, and I was carrying it out. And I remember I think me and AK were in each other's face, and he smacked it out of my hand,
Yeah.
and I think it almost hit Rick's girlfriend in the face whenever he smacked it out of my hand. So I think Rick legitimately wanted to like fight me because he thought that I don't think he saw it.
Uh-huh.
I think he thought that I threw it at his girlfriend. Um,
Whoa.
and so I just remember after the match, someone came up to me and was like, "Yo, don't go around Rick." And I was like, "Why?" I was like,
Right.
Me and Rick are cool. I was like, "Me and Rick are cool." And they're
Yeah.
like, "No, like Rick wants to beat your ass." So I'm like, "Wait, what?" Like, what did that? What? I was like, "Is it over the girlfriend thing?" And they're like, "No, I think a fidget spinner almost hit his girlfriend in the face or something like that."
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, "Oh God!" I was like, "Rick, if there's like one guy I don't want heat with, it's
Like
Rick
Rios.
Rios."
Right.
Uh, um, but yeah, uh, but of course, it was all water under the bridge. Me and Rick's actually really good friends now. Uh,
Nice.
I mean, we talk all the time. I'm trying to get him down to VTW at some point, even if he's not a worker. Uh, have him make a special appearance or something.
Still, yeah. Right. I
But
mean,
yeah,
I still
that
would
was
love to see
the
a TOP and go ahead.
I
TOP
mean
and Killer Instinct is something.
if I mean if they would be willing to if they were willing to wrestle, book it.
Right. Is that going to show up so I can do that? So D-Lock says, what about the story of you having to take a shit, which Rick's match?
Oh, great. Oh, yeah. Let me get into that real fast. So, so Rick and TJ are actually two of the guys who I never got a chance to wrestle, like in like the yard days.
Yeah.
So like, so like, I was supposed to wrestle Rick Rios at a show. I forget what I think I was supposed to wrestle him at Thanksgiving Thunder, one year, and because I know we had hyped it up where he gave me the Superman punch during my entrance or something during a match. I think it
Yeah.
was during the match against D-Lock, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was. I might be throwing two things together, but I remember it was time to film our match, and of course I had to take a number two, and and since VTW is on my land, I just ran up to my house, and I ran up to my house, and at the time I'm wearing those blue tights, and I for some reason it's like I'm sweating, I can't get the tights up, and so it takes me forever to get back down there.
Yeah.
And me and Rick are supposed to go next. So we were filming something else, and then we were supposed to film me and Rick. So Rick was already ready to go. I mean, Rick was, I think he like drunk an energy drink. He was ready to freaking go. And then it took me forever up here. And so I walked back down, and Rick's in a cutoff shirt and his basketball shorts, and he's like walking around, and I'm walking around. I'm like, yo, are we not filming this match? And then Yankee grabs me. He's like, yo, man, Ricky's pissed off.
No.
He's like, Ricky's pissed off at you. I'm like, why? And he's like, bro, you took too long. He said, you took too long up in the shitter. He got impatient. And I'm sitting there. I'm like, are you serious?
Right.
Like, I was like, are you freaking serious? And then so I was like, dude, go throw your gear back on. I was like, let's do this. And he's like, nope, you had your chance. Nope.
You had your chance and you blew it.
And I'm like, well, crap. But yeah, that was fun. Yeah, I really wish I got to wrestle him.
Right. D-Lo, I don't know if you remember when you almost had to call off the match at Halloween Hangover.
You might have to reiterate that to me. It's not ringing a bell.
Let's see if he gets to it.
So while we're waiting, I'm gonna go turn the light on.
Very good. Wait on that. Let's go to VTW Mania 2018, since that happened just before Biddy 4. Of course, the match you guys would have there would be the 1-year anniversary as tag team champions, and you and Ecstatic would be defending against the FTC.
Yep.
Who had a therapist manager at the time.
Oh,
quite the interesting first time ever tornado tag team match that you guys had been part of.
That match, I hate saying this, that match was the only good thing about Mania 2018. I might catch heat for that, but to me, that was the only good thing that came out of that show, because there was cancellations. Chase got hurt. And like, so I mean, there was a lot of stuff that like went down there. Oh, there he is.
Right.
Walker.
Yeah. I was kind of scrolling through it last night, and it was fun rewatching the match that you guys had with Cam and Drew. Interesting seeing all the fish that were brought out in the rotisserie chicken that was brought out in the match. But
yeah. Cam had the fish, and so I was like,
yep.
I need to bring in the chicken. That led to the whole, you're choking the chicken, bam, hitting him with it.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it was definitely a fun match, and like I said before, I think that was the only good thing in my eyes that happened at VTW Mania 2018. Still wish that the tag match would have been the main event. And that's not saying anything about who was in the main event. I think the tag match had the most build. I think the tag match had the most momentum going for it.
Yeah.
It was the longest build. Now, of course, if the original match of Chase and Jamal would have happened, I would have said that needs to be the main.
Right.
Nerd.
Jason Charles going at it. It was definitely interesting to see Dirty DeChico get spotlight in the main event from the injury there, but D'Lo saying Mania 2018 was his biggest regret.
Yeah, I think D'Lo couldn't come to that show for some reason. And then I think Dustin no-showed that show. And then Chase got hurt. So then that's why Dirty DeChico was in the main. Then Zach was in the 2-on-1 handicap match,
right,
against Spencer and K9.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean that show just had everything thrown at it, and it was like the only thing that kind of stayed the same was the tag team match.
Yeah,
and that's another reason why I thought that should have been the main event.
I disagree. From there, before we go too far into it, of course, that point that year was kind of when things started going haywire, if you will, in the community.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was.
Whoops. Jake Hudson in says hello.
Hello, Jake.
That was a weird time for VTW. I think it was a weird time for a lot of.
Yeah, that was a, and I'll touch on that after I talk about the triple threat match. It was a very weird time. A lot of hostility.
So going in, I mean, we knew months ahead of time that Biddy 4 was going to take place. The build, there wasn't any really much to it, honestly. No. And it kind of just got thrown out there to the public once it did get released. Dick Hudson asking, how are you doing today?
Doing great, man. How are you?
But you would get brought in. You'd have Ustalo and Hellhound in a triple threat match. The build up to it was Ustalo called you out and wanted not Tyler Aitken, he wanted Tyler Storm.
Yeah.
And then Hellhound got thrown in there as well. I will say it was a pretty decent triple threat match for the three guys that were involved in it, in my opinion.
I will say that, and I know, and I'm glad it didn't happen. That was actually supposed to be my swan song. That was supposed to be my last backyard wrestling match. That was supposed to be my last VTW match because I was so hell bent on the indies at that point to where I told both Hellhound and Ustalo, I was like, you guys are the guys who's going to keep on doing backyard stuff. Let me, be kind of like, because at the time, about which I mean, Ustalo, he started doing big things in UWE, and then
right,
Hellhound, of course, he started making a name for himself on the Indies
Yeah.
and even in backyard wrestling, and so like in a way, I felt like I was kind of like the star in that match,
Hmm.
but I wanted it to elevate both of them so that you know they could have something to brag about, be like, oh, I've got a win over Tyler Storm,
Right.
and then I could go do my indie stuff, and they can keep the backyard wrestling stuff afloat.
Right.
Uh, that's in the yard 4. I mean, that one and best in the yard 5 is tied for my least favorite best in the yards.
Yeah.
Um, it was just, and I think best in the yard 4, I think was, in my opinion, uh, I liked it like worse than the 5th one. Um, yeah, there was just, I felt like there was too much. I felt like there was way too many matches on the card. Um,
Hmm.
I mean, it felt like there was 20 matches on the whole show.
Yeah.
Um, it just, and I think with all the tension that was going on at the time with everybody, that's another reason why to me, it just didn't really feel like best in the yard. It just felt like a mega show with just a bunch of names.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, I enjoyed. I know everybody jokes around about Usalo and everything like that. I mean, I enjoyed wrestling him, even though he was kind of hard to work with at first.
Right.
Uh,
It's saying, of course, the biddies I was in are the worst ones.
you wasn't the reason for that. Uh,
Right.
it was just overall because I'm really big about vibes and just the vibe at that show. At both 4 and 5, like 5 was a good like swan song for best in the yard, I guess. Uh, to me, it still didn't feel like best in the yard. Um, the only thing that really felt like a best in the yard thing was the Cam and Everett stuff.
Yeah.
Everything else just seemed kind of thrown together. Uh, like like I know Aaron and Yankee had a match on Best in the Yard 5, but like besides that match and Everett and Cam, everything else on that show was just thrown together.
Yeah.
Uh, and like I said, it didn't feel like a Best in the Yard event, if I could say
Right.
it.
I get you. Still brought some newer faces to VTW, of course, both Biddy 4 and Biddy 5, but
Mhm.
I get where you're coming from. Dilo says, what I was referring to was Ecstatic and Casey had heat before our match at Halloween Hangover.
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I remember Ecstatic had really a lot of people had heat with Casey Chambers. And I remember like Ecstatic and Casey did not get along at all. Uh, we thought that it was going to be a literal shoot during the match, and that's the reason why we were kind of so keen on it. I think we ended up doing the match, but I mean, they literally beat the hell out of each other, like for real. Uh,
Wow.
and I remember, I think we had to, I think we called D'Lo in, and we're like, "Yo, we're like, we're scared that match is going to turn into a shoot because they don't like each other." Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, but then again, Casey Chambers, I'll put him over real fast. He's actually doing really great on the Indies right now. Has Tommy Django. Uh, he's nothing but respectful now to everybody. So I have no issues with him whatsoever. Uh, he's definitely grown up a lot since 2018 VTW times.
That's good. And I don't know about his indie stuff, but I know I wasn't a huge fan of some of the things you've seen, the attitude that you've seen from him more so in VTW back in those days.
Yeah.
So not much to talk about for Biddy 4. You kind of touched on Biddy 5 a little bit. I do want to talk a little bit about the match that you had, and we're going to go back to some other VTW stuff before or after that too. But
Yeah.
you and Ecstatic would team up as the Bad Sons again and go against DW and Buggy Wright. What was that match like for you to be a part of and face those two guys?
Uh, thrown together. That's about the best way that I could put it. Always wanted to wrestle DW and Buggy because I know, whenever we were kind of, they came from a group of backyard wrestlers that kind of looked up to VTW. And so both of those guys kind of looked up to me and Nick because growing up, we're who they watched. And so, it was kind of like a full circle type thing. And I'm sure they felt really good about the match and everything like that. It's just, I'm a story guy. If I don't have some kind of story going on, if I'm just in a thrown together match, my interest isn't there. The match isn't going to be good. Which, I mean, the match was. I mean, I don't know what your opinion is on it, but I mean, the match was all right. It was. I mean, it wasn't nothing. I mean, it's a match. It's a match that you remember happened, but you just don't remember what happened during the match.
Right. I would say that.
And then me and Nick hadn't teamed up in forever. Because I think we filmed Best in the Yard 5 during COVID, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so.
So
and I guys indoors again for that one.
Yeah. Because we were in the infamous building that literally every indie in North Carolina worked. That's the building that we worked. But yeah, I mean, Best in the R5, it just wasn't one of my favorites from I mean, of course, I loved seeing everybody there. I loved hanging out with everybody. Because, I mean, it was a long time. That was the first time we saw Yankee in forever. First time we saw a lot of people. I met a few people that day.
Right.
It was just, that match was just kind of thrown at us, and we're like, hey, you guys are doing this. And you got the Bad Sons, very popular tag team in the community against, DW and Buggy Wright, which a lot of people did not know who they were.
Right.
But, we tried to, do the passing of the torch to them because we didn't know where Best in the R5 would lead everybody.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, it could have been a lot better. I would have really liked to have had a story at Best in the Yard 5.
Yeah.
But the cards just wasn't on the table for it.
And just to put a bow on one thing I mentioned earlier, Biddy 5, of course, seen the ending, if you will, of Drew Hood and Joseph Everhart's rivalry as well, the full circle moment, if you will.
Yeah, that was. I know I didn't mention that at first, but
yeah,
that was probably the match. Not taking anything away from Cam and Ev, but that was probably the match that I was looking the most forward to, going into it, as a fan.
Yeah,
because I was there through all of the shit talk, all of the heat, all of the, everything. I had to kick Joseph out of my house before because Drew was coming and they had mega heat and I wasn't about to have a fight at my house.
Right.
So, and I know at the time they both wanted to rip each other's throats out. And so I made Joseph leave. And that's whenever Drew came, because Drew was technically a part of VTW and he was one of the, he was our John Cena at the time. And so if it caused tension and heat right there, I mean, I don't like tension. I don't like having heat and all that stuff. So, I mean, if I can avoid it, I'm going to avoid it.
I get that. Right. It was a pretty decent show when it got released, but you can kind of tell that a lot of that was just kind of thrown out there
Yeah.
too.
I'd like to say Best in Yard 5 was kind of like a one match show, if you think about it.
Yeah, I believe it because most people were looking forward to that main event more so than
Yeah.
anything else, and seeing if Everett could finally get that victory over Cam.
Which, I mean, sometimes like a one match show can be good for the people involved in the big match,
Right.
but then everything else just kind of gets shoved to the side and nobody remembers it.
Yeah. All right. From there, I didn't really go back and look at a whole lot of your indie stuff, but we can talk a little bit on the independent career. You
Okay.
mentioned earlier how you had the run with Zach.
Mm-hmm.
COVID kind of halted all that. You did mention I have seen videos before that you posted on YouTube, the tag team title runs that you guys had.
Mm-hmm.
Pretty impressive team you two seem to be on the indies. Do you think that's something maybe you could bring to BTW at some point in time if the right stars align, so as to speak?
Yeah. My biggest thing that I tell everybody that is currently in VTW and everybody that comes into VTW, timing is everything.
Right.
I'm a big sucker for making things make sense. If it makes sense to bring the skinny dudes into VTW, we'll do it. But if it doesn't, then that'll just be like an indie exclusive. But as far as my like indie career goes, 2019 was probably my hottest year that I had.
Yeah.
I was wrestling Friday nights, Saturday nights, and Sunday nights
Wow.
at a time, and I mean it literally beat my body up, which I think is the reason why whenever COVID hit and everything shut down, I was kind of glad because my body had had enough. My car had had enough from traveling.
Right.
But I know I was in a different city every single weekend.
Yeah.
Like I remember probably the biggest company that we wrestled for was Firestar, Firestar Pro Wrestling it's in Winston Salem, North Carolina, and we had like a kind of had like a rivalry going on in like in Eastern North Carolina with the Wrestling Prodigies, which they've been featured on AEW and stuff, and which is
Yeah.
Jackson Drake and Malachi. Jackson Drake was actually just on Monday Night Raw a couple weeks ago wrestling the Jinder Mahal's group of people.
Into short. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, him and Lucky Ali, which I've actually wrestled Lucky Ali too, and
Nice.
great competitor. It's good to see where all Lucky Ali's at now. I mean, he's on DPW. He's working Monday Night Raw, AEW, all that stuff now. So I mean, it's kind of crazy just some of the people that I've been in the locker room with. I know I've spoke to legends in the locker room. People that's currently on TV right now. Like a couple weeks ago, I was in the locker room with Bobby Fish.
Wow. Yeah, I think I did see some pictures of that.
Yeah, I was on a show with Bobby Fish a couple weeks ago at ACCW.
Mm-hmm.
I was me and Zach actually ran in for the save on Gunner, which
I seen that video too.
was Jackson Riker from WWE. Which that was like a full circle moment because I grew up watching Gunner. So it was kind of crazy to be in the ring with him and actually to save him. So I was kind of like, in a way, I was fangirling. I know he's got a lot of controversial things going on.
Right.
I mean, it was still just a full circle moment because that's a guy who I like grew up watching and admiring.
Right. I get that.
But yeah, that's kind of a basic rundown of the indie stuff that I've done, and of course, like with the Goobah stuff. And here lately, I've basically been kind of exclusive to ACCW. I haven't really worked any other indies besides that because I'm
Tyler versus Everett score settles on a local indie near you.
I would love to wrestle Joseph again. Like I said, Joseph stayed the night with me. He had a he actually stayed the night with me. Best in the Yard 5. He asked, he's like, "Hey man, can I stay at your house?" I'm like, "Sure." So yeah, I mean, I would love to wrestle Joseph on the Indies. I mean, I'd love to wrestle there's a lot of people who I'd really like to wrestle. Like on the Indies in VTW. Heck, you never know. We might see some we might see some popular indie guys come to VTW at some point. Who knows?
Right.
But yeah, and then I know I've won I won the Apple City Championship. It's like the only singles championship that I've won on the Indies. I mean that right there in itself was very good because that was actually after we lost Avery. That was like 2 or 3 months after we lost Avery.
Yeah.
And yeah.
It's a receipt somewhere as long as my knees hold up.
Hey, let's go.
One last thing for the Indies part. I know Ecstatic was on the Indies. So you guys all pretty much started in the Indies together, but he got injured early on. Do you think the Bad Sons possibly could have been a thing on the Indie scene as well if the injury wouldn't have happened to him?
I'll go on ahead and say no. It couldn't have, because the Skinny Dudes actually got started at like my 3rd or 4th indie show that I worked.
Mm-hmm.
And there was, whenever I first got brought onto the indies, the promoter of ACCW at the time, it was actually Mike Levy. He's wrestled on VTW before.
Yep.
He was the old ACCW promoter before it got taken over by the new leadership. We actually pitched to him about doing the Bad Sons on the indies.
Mm-hmm.
And like we were just going to do it there at ACCW, but it got to the point, or like he wanted Ecstatic to be a singles guy, and then he wanted me to be kind of like the tag guy, and then he saw something in me and Zach being a tag team. So like the Skinny Dudes was a really big thing, and
Right.
there was only one time on the indies that me and Nick were going to team up and be the Bad Sons, and that was at a Ground Zero taping during COVID, because this was at the time that Zach was taking a little break from wrestling at the time, and James Johnson, the promoter of Ground Zero, wanted to bring the Bad Sons in, but unfortunately, I got COVID and Ecstatic got COVID, so we were off the show. Couldn't do it because this is at peak times when everybody was freaking out about COVID. Everybody, like you couldn't even. This was at the time where you couldn't even cough in public.
Right.
So, I mean, there's no way if we were sick that we were going to come around anybody.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay. Might jump into that a little bit later. I seen you got a big match coming up in Indies wise this upcoming weekend too. So, but we'll get into that a little more later. Let me see. So you guys would take the hiatus at that point, pretty much from VTW. We'll get into a couple of returns that you guys would have, but I want to see if there's. I'm going to get to Navon's questions here first. It says, ask if you remember your first time wrestling inside a squared circle, and if you remember the prophecy given to you the night before in the Chilling Graveyard.
Yeah, that was so Navon was actually my first opponent in a wrestling ring. That was the first time that I had ever wrestled, and that was like the first time that I'd ever wrestled in a like a wrestling ring was against Navon.
Yeah.
That would actually be pretty dope to do me and Joseph next year sometime. But yeah, me and Devon was actually my first in ring match that I ever had. Moving from the trampoline to the ring.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I think it was a really good match, and the story that we told, because that was the first encounter with me and Devon. So Navon actually brought out Tyler Storm during that match. Then I know we used my ex girlfriend. I know she walked out with Navon, and Navon like possessed her and done all that stuff. But yeah, it was fun to work Navon in the ring for the first time. I went back and actually watched that match about 2 weeks ago, and I was like, man, I've came a long way since then.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
So he had one other question and wanted me to tell you one thing. Wanted me to ask you, why do you put yourself at risk more than anyone else at having 9 fingers instead of all 10?
Oh yeah, I think besides Yankee, I think I'm the number one guy that tries to put my whole fist in Navon's mouth. So,
That's good. That's very good.
so I don't know if you know or if anybody watching. I mean, some of the people that I can see in the live comments know like the kind of inside story with that. So Navon told us one time that he doesn't like people pointing at him, like putting their fingers in his face.
Yep.
So, I mean, I'm usually the cool guy that everybody gets along with, but I'm also an instigator. If I can see something can be instigated, I'm going to instigate it.
Right.
And so I saw the video of like Yankee doing it all the time to him, and like him getting pissed off and slapping Yankee and doing all that stuff. And so I'm like, oh, you know what? I'll try it. And so like, we'll have our taping weekends where everybody's down, and I'll just be putting my finger in Navon's face, waving it around, and Navon will be like, "Ah, don't you put that finger in my face? Don't you put that finger in my face?" And then it escalated from that to every time that I would do it, he would slap my hand. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take it up a notch. So this is where it really happened. And of course, and then after this is whenever I think everybody started doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Reunion Rumble. And I remember I told everybody that was going to be in the ring, I said, hey, whenever you hear my music, it's going to be me and Navon are going to do a stare down because we're going to rekindle our feud somehow. But I told everybody, I'm like, I'm putting my whole hand in Navon's mouth. Like I'm gonna point at him, and I'm gonna stick my whole finger down his throat. And so, of course, my music hits. Navon's standing in the ring. He's like, "Come on, Tyler, come on, let's fight." And everybody's standing around the ring, just waiting for it to happen. I get in the ring, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." Fingers right down. I mean, I got my fingers all the way down his throat. And I just remember he punched me directly in the face. Punched me directly in the face. And so I'm laughing at this point. So I fall to the ground. And I remember he starts shoot stomping me. And I can't stop laughing. I legit can't stop laughing because Navon is cussing up a storm. He's pissed off. He's like, I can't believe you done that shit. I can't believe you. And he's sitting there like stomping me. And then after the match, I had a boot print on the side of my face from where he kicked me. And I had boot prints all up and down my arm and all up and down my ribs and all that stuff. I mean, he was laying in. He was not happy with that.
I believe it.
But then that's whenever I noticed like a lot of the DBW crew started doing it. Like I know Caleb Matthews, a really big instigator with it. I know Chase Wakefield. He's another big instigator with Navon. Yeah, I love annoying Navon. It's one of my most fun things to do.
Right. I think I've heard a few other people that like that too. So
yeah,
he gets his revenge in some ways, from what I've heard as well. I mean, the guy's notorious for his Uno games, so
cheats at him too.
I believe it. The last thing you wanted me to say, ask you if you'll let your family know that he's asking about them. He hopes that you're all well and he misses you guys.
Miss you too, Navon.
Right. So from there, got all that out of the way. Let's go into the brief return, or the first return, if you will, of VTW, Popular Demand. And this brought about a whole different scenery, I guess you could say, for VTW. The ring setup, all that different, and you guys had a live crowd. You could see there, pretty big crowd, probably one of the biggest in VTW. What was it like for you guys to decide to put on this show, Popular Demand, that had been demanded, as it would seem? We'd find out later you guys thought it was pretty much the swan song for VTW at that point in time. But having the main event be you, Ecstatic, and Aaron, as Ecstatic made his return from the injury.
Yeah, that was basically supposed to be VTW's that we were ever going to do. Because that was another gift that COVID brought us.
Right.
Was that VTW show, because everybody's like, because a lot of people that was booked every weekend, all of a sudden the companies that they were working on every week and every other week weren't running anymore. So everybody that was, in VTW, old VTW guys were like, hey, let's just get together and, let's just film a show. Let's just film a show together. And, at the time we thought that we were going to get heat for a lot of the stuff that we done. Like we honestly thought that, a lot of these indie promoters and all this stuff is going to be like, oh, they're wrestling in the backyard. Oh, come on. Like you after we see this, so of course, we were all worried about that. Which nowadays, I mean, just from what I've seen, a lot of indie companies resorted to going to the backyard during COVID time. So I know there was a big indie in the Carolinas that went to the backyard during COVID time, and I was like, okay, if they can do this and not catch any heat for it, we can do it and not catch any heat.
Right.
But like for real, like we thought that was the swan song for VTW. We thought that was gonna be it. But we brought on some new people. I know we brought on James Johnson and Selena Rose for that show. Yeah, I mean, and Dustin returned at that show.
Exactly.
Then we had the triple threat match, Cam versus K9.
Yep.
The triple threat with Spencer, K9, and DW. Or was it Buggy? It might have been Buggy. Yeah, it was Buggy. Buggy, DW, and Spencer. I think Jamal Payne wrestled Mike Levy on that show.
Yes.
So I mean, it was a lot of. We were wanting to make it like a nostalgia show, just like let's bring all the VTW guys that went to the Indies on, have a little swan song, have like a hey, we're done, and then we go back to trying to make a name for ourselves on the Indies.
Right.
Obviously, after that recording, we all sat back and we're like, this has been a good 10, 12-year thing that we've been doing here. This is,
Yeah.
I think this was the perfect way to close the doors on this. Of course, what's went on since then. Of course, it's not the
Right. What we're gonna do. What was that match like for you though? Having Aaron and Nick in there for that final triple threat match at that point in time. One spot that really stands out that when I was watching it back last night, you have this chair down there and you put the gravel on it before suplexing Nick Ecstatic on it. Definitely not something you've seen.
Yeah, that was definitely an ecstatic spot. He definitely called that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was very much at that moment because this was I know I touched on it probably about an hour earlier, but I know going into that match, my head wasn't really in wrestling. I really didn't want to wrestle anymore. I thought I was pretty much done because COVID thing had really made me realize I'm like, hey, I'm kind of burnt out from this.
Yeah.
So I mean, for that match, I was like, okay, I'm wrestling Aaron and Nick. This can be my way of kind of getting out, at least for a little bit.
Right.
But I really enjoyed working both of them. I like the finish. And then you had guys like D-Lock that kind of kept the VTW spirit alive while all of us were kind of on the indies, doing our own thing.
Yep. It's definitely a fun match to watch. Of course, from there we would get another show in Christmas Chaos.
Mm-hmm.
You and Everett Creed, of course.
Yep.
As the tribute pretty much to Avery, as Avery was there in the golf cart.
Yep.
What was it like for you to kick off that show with the promo, having Avery there to watch it, having Everett involved in all of that in the match?
I mean, that match right there, I know it's just, I know the Best in the Yard 1 match, means a lot to like the history of like this community and just
right.
VTW in general. But as far as like meaningful to me, that match is one of the most meaningful matches because that's actually one of the last matches Avery watched me have live. So, so I mean, of course that match is, I mean, it was a match that Avery, it was two people in there that Avery both had history with me and Everett. So I mean, I think it was a really good match that Avery got to see, before the sickness, took over with him. But I actually personally requested that match against Everett because I really wanted to wrestle Everett on that show, and Everett said he was coming, so I was like, hey, let's just rekindle the feud. Let's bring it back.
All right. Of course, he had to go over the golf cart and talk to April and bring up stuff too. But throwing the jacket at the cart after you made the interesting entrance for the match. And then, of course, you go past Christmas Chaos, you get in the win with the Goobah lock over Everett, which was the first time in VTW we've seen that.
Yep.
You go into Reunion, and the Reunion Rumble, obviously the last match, we'd see that Avery was watching.
Oh, yeah.
What did it mean to you to have the 21 men come together and have the crowning of a new VTW World Champion there at Reunion Rumble?
I mean, it really meant a lot.
to have
Because
Avery the
because
front row and center to see it happen.
what was that?
I didn't say nothing. Just
Oh, but I mean, it meant a lot because this was at the time where we were all like, maybe because at the time a lot of our hearts wasn't really in the indies, um, like I've said many a times on the podcast, COVID I think was a blessing in disguise. It made us really open up our eyes to what really like it really opened up our eyes to what we actually wanted to do and what we enjoyed doing.
right.
So like to have the reunion rumble where we crowned the new VTW World Heavyweight Champion, uh, you know, we got together, all them guys, and we're like, the reunion rumble is one of the most popular things VTW does, and
Yeah.
we're like, what about just we crown a new VTW World Heavyweight Champion? If it goes somewhere, it goes somewhere, and if it doesn't, then we can say Zach was the last ever VTW World Heavyweight Champion, and we can
Right.
ride off of it that way.
Mhm.
But of course, came down to Zach Daniels and Jacob Bryan, which at the time, Jacob Bryan is actually a guy that we met on the Indies,
Right.
and he was kind of the guy on the Indies that kind of clicked with us the best, in my opinion.
Yeah.
To where we brought him on board to VTW. He clicks like, and there's been many a times where he's told all of us that he wishes that he was around for the best in the yard era of this community
Nice.
because he said that he's went and he's watched all of it back, and he truly enjoyed like all of the older, even the trampoline stuff, and all the stuff from back in the day, and he wishes that he could have traveled and went to UWE and NUW and all them places.
Right.
So like we thought that it would be a good thing to have them two close with like the new breed of VTW if we're really gonna bring this back versus one of the originals in Zach Daniels, and
Right.
have them be the ending to the reunion rumble.
Yeah. Good finish to the Rumble, anyways. Of course, that would lead us into losing Avery.
Yeah.
A year lost from seeing any of VTW. I would assume a lot to do with that situation.
I was going to touch on that. That was the main reason why VTW didn't upload for almost a year after that, was because of the Avery stuff. I mean, we were still grieving over all that stuff. We were still trying to really figure out, what we wanted to do wrestling wise. And like we were mainly wanting to see what the next chapter was without, one of our original people were. So yeah, that was
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, that was like the loss of Avery definitely affected, everybody in BTW at the time, especially like our core guys. Like, I remember seeing like, because I remember at the time I didn't see D-Lock for the longest time, and I know D-Lock was at Avery's funeral. There was a couple other guys that came to Avery's funeral, and I was just like, like these are the guys that I know are, VTW born and bled. And like just the guys that, sent their wishes and support and everything during all that stuff. Cause it definitely affected. It didn't just affect me.
Oh,
I mean, I'm related to Avery, and I mean, it didn't just affect me; it affected everybody. That was, that worked close with Avery, and that's wrestled Avery, and that's done all that stuff. Yeah, I mean, it was, it was a very quick thing. I mean, it was. I know he got diagnosed with cancer back in May of that year, May of 2021, and it took him. I mean, it took him quick. I mean, because from May, I mean, and like I said, May he was fine. I mean, he was perfect. I mean, he acted like nothing was wrong with him, but
right.
got the diagnosis, and I mean, like they always say, cancer can pull somebody down quick.
Yeah, I've seen it. I have seen it, so I know exactly how that is. So I had to mean the world to you guys in general just to do those last two shows, though, for Avery.
Yeah, he's the whole inspiration of why we even done those shows. Like if it wouldn't have, like it sounds bad me saying this, but like if it wasn't for him getting sick, those shows wouldn't even have happened.
Yeah, I get that.
Because like those two shows were kind of like his birthday presents from all of us, because he wanted a wrestling show, but at the time his cancer was getting worse, so he couldn't go out in public to like an indie show or something.
Right.
So we decided to bring the wrestling to him, and that's whenever we've done the 2 VTW shows.
Yeah. And I was watching back the episode I did with him on here last night too, from 4 or 5 years ago now.
Yep.
Like, yeah, brings back a lot of memories, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, then from there, you go off for the year. You guys came back though this year. I would say maybe even stronger than ever. Right now, anyways.
Yep.
Brings us back to BTW Return. You guys start with New Horizons, and we kick off the show with you coming out there to say that you're the new boss man. Of course, we get the whole rivalry we've got right now with you and Aaron Jones out of it. Walk me through what led you guys to decide this was the time and this was the place to move forward, start this up again, and then we'll get more into the current situations, if you will.
Well, of course, I'm not really gonna. I'm really not gonna be in character or anything during this. But so back in November, I'm glad I ever got to see and receive his flowers. Most definitely, I'm so thankful he got to see the last little bit of VTW.
Right.
But so all of us, which all of us being like the OG4, I'll say, we were all sitting back and like we had seen, like how D-Lock was, still wrestling like a DBW, and how a lot of like the former VTW guys that we had kind of lost touch with was still kind of doing things in the community and around. So we all went and sat back, and I will say this: I'm very thankful for the Indies. I'm very thankful that I've had chances to meet all these people. I've got to meet TV guys, WWE guys, AEW guys. I'm very thankful for all that stuff. But the Indies in general is not really where my heart is, if I can say that.
I get that.
Like, I've always said VTW has been kind of special to me. This community has been kind of special to me. It's always had a special place in my heart because this is truly where I started.
Right.
And I was like, the indies don't vibe like VTW vibes. And so it was the OG4, and we were all here at my house, and we were all sitting here thinking, and we're like, what if, guys? What if we brought this back? And then like we all kind of shrugged it off. We're like, nah. But actually, after Avery passed away, I actually purchased the ring that we currently use.
Yeah.
And because at the time we had thrown out the idea after Avery passed, we're like, Avery would want us to keep VTW going. This is like this is his creation. He wouldn't want it to, he wouldn't want this to just die off after he leaves this earth. So we're like, so I was like, I'm gonna use some of the money I've got. I'm gonna buy us a ring. So I ended up buying us, the ring that we see on VTW now. Very, very nice ring.
Looks like it, yeah.
And so I ended up, purchasing a High Spots ring. And we actually did have a show. So Avery passed away December of 2021. We had a show in July of 2022 that never surfaced. It was never on. It never came to be anything. We recorded it. We went and we recorded it. We actually had guys like Everett there. We had Chase Bridges. We had Indy guys like Mike Levy. We had all of the original VTW guys. We had D-Lock, Jacob Bryan. We had all those guys that came, and we put on a show. We had a YouTube championship tournament.
Oh.
We were gonna crown the first YouTube champion.
Yeah.
But it ended up never surfacing. I can just go ahead and tell you this. The finals for that match was actually supposed to be myself versus D-Lock for the YouTube championship.
Oh, that sucked.
If we would have kept rolling with it, that was supposed to be the match at our Ultimate Redemption VTW Mania show. It was supposed to be myself versus D-Lock for the YouTube championship. But the plans that we had weren't going to be as we were running into roadblocks with a lot of the feuds that we had that we were going to have going forward. Of course, me and D-Lock would have had a hell of a match. We were going to continue the story running with Zach Daniels and Jacob for the World Championship. We were going to continue that story going. There was going to be a couple of mini stories that we were going to have going on, but they just didn't the matches would have been amazing, but the stories wouldn't have really went anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's the reason why we all made it kind of an agreement. We're like, yeah, we're not going to post this. We're not going to post this story or this show.
So, yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of and eventually, this is a little spoiler alert. We're bringing back the VTW Extra channel. We're going to be posting extra matches and all that stuff on there. You never know. Never know. One day we might post some of those matches on there because there was a lot of good matches that did happen there. I do know one that sticks out in my mind was Ecstatic wrestled Chase Bridges, and that match was fantastic.
Nice.
And then the other match that I remember from that show that we recorded, the tournament show, was Everett Creed wrestled D-Lock for the first time. So that was two matches that I remember off the top of my head, and that were really good. But yeah, that match or that show never surfaced or anything.
Yeah.
But going back into January with New Horizons, we all sat down and we're like, we can really think of something really good to bring VTW back, and that's whenever we ended up starting with the Aaron Jones and Tyler Aitken story, which
I don't mean to brag on myself, but I'm actually the one who came up with the storyline. I pitched it to Aaron.
Nice.
He as soon as I pitched it to him, he's like, this is gonna hurt emotionally to do this, but let's do it.
Right.
Which I mean, me and Aaron have talked after Ultimate Redemption and everything like that, and this has by far been one of the most excruciating rivalries, that we've
I
had to
bet.
go through emotionally.
Yeah.
But I think if I didn't care about the VTW World Heavyweight Championship, that match could have been the main event of Ultimate Redemption. But I feel like the World Championship is still more important than a rivalry without the title.
Yeah.
So that was basically, what came of the me and Aaron feud.
Mhm.
Definitely enjoyed, starting it up first thing on New Horizons.
It's good. It's been definitely a very interesting rivalry to watch. Of course, if you want to jump forward to it, the match at Ultimate Redemption was really good. The injury, though, that took place during it and the dehydration and all that had to put a damper into the plans of what you guys were doing in that match, though.
Going to Ultimate Redemption, because I mean, I could talk about the feud, with the shoot promos and me and him both cut on each other. Going to him costing me the match at Pot of Gold, and doing all that stuff just to continue the feud or whatever, and then the blow off at Ultimate Redemption. Yeah, me and Aaron actually had a lot of stuff planned. We were gonna do, we were just gonna kick each other's ass. Heat that day, I don't know what it is, and I'm hoping our next couple summer filmings and the heat's not beating down like that. But my God, the heat was so bad that day. I got one of the worst cramps in my leg that I've ever gotten in my entire life during that match. And it was just literally from doing a back roll.
Right. I can kind of see it.
I mean, it was.
At least you didn't get hung by him this time.
That's happened before. So
I remember that now.
I got hung one time, and now calf cramp next time.
Right. Me and Tyler both got hurt at Ultimate Redemption. Our damn luck. D-Lock says.
D-Lock actually did get hurt. I think he hurt his elbow. I think whenever he done that springboard shotgun kick, he landed awkwardly on his elbow. Kind of messed up his elbow. But
incredible shotgun.
But like that cramp that I had, absolutely terrible. Like it was to the point where I had to walk off because I was in so much pain and I couldn't even stand. And then like I was sitting there, and Dustin Reagan was a special guest ref, and he kept telling me, he's like, "Hey, do you want me to just call it?" And I looked up at him, and I said, "No." I said, "Just give me a minute." I was like, "Just give me a minute," which thank God for post-production, because God forbid if I'd have been on a live independent show or something. But yeah, thank God for post-production and replays and all that stuff now in the current age of ETW.
Right.
But yeah, we were going to do a lot more, but in a way, I think the injury kind of added more story to the match.
I agree.
Of course, I know, we probably left a lot of fans wanting more out of that just by, how it ended. But but I think the right person won. I think with the direction that with the direction of this, I can definitely think that we made the right call with Aaron going over, and you and everyone else can see in the future
Right.
what develops from
Out of
this.
it. Yeah. Do have to touch on it though. The entrances, I know, pull the cat back. They pull the curtain back a little bit here. You got a lot to do with the graphics now. The entrances that both you and Aaron had for this show were incredible. You doing the playback to both Aiken and Storm, and then
Yeah.
Aaron coming out to Avery's theme song and bringing out the bat and all that. It was a great entrances for both of you, and a great tribute for Avery.
Yep. That match with Aaron at Ultimate Redemption is probably it's in my top 3 matches in VTW history.
Nice.
Just like if you include that match with the whole build to it and everything, it's one of my top 3 things that I've done in VTW.
Nice. Talking about VTW from the past to current, one thing some people probably notice, you guys used to do live commentary, but now you guys do it like you'd see a lot of backyards doing. You do it post-op or post-production. You do commentary on there. How has that been for you guys to make that adjustment, that change to the production?
So for me personally, over the past couple of months and like even before VTW came back, I was thinking of ways that we can make VTW look more professional. And the number one thing that I kept looking, because I of course I'd done my research and I watched other feds. I watched backyard feds. I watched independent federations that upload on YouTube. I watched a lot of stuff like that, and I'm like, we don't need to do commentary behind the camera anymore. I was like, I really think that we should do post commentary, and add it onto the show post instead of doing it behind because I think it's a lot more professional, and see if you commentating behind the camera, you could forget something storyline wise that the commentators are supposed to say.
Yeah.
And me personally, I enjoy what me and Zach are doing on commentary at the moment, because we're able to write down key points that we got to say during commentary, and we make sure we touch on those points. So if we got a new fan watching and they don't know why Asher Christ and D-Lock is fighting right now, we got these key points that we say, oh, D-Lock's done this. Oh, Asher Christ has done this.
Right.
Oh, why does Aaron Jones hate Tyler Aiken so much? Oh, who better than Zach Daniels? Why they keep saying that? It's just it's a lot more professional. And then for other things like promo packages, all that stuff works a whole lot better.
Right.
If any fan is watching this right now, you can actually go on the VTW page on our playlist area. You can watch individual matches that don't have commentary. So if anybody wants to make highlight videos or like the review shows and all that stuff, those are on there if you want to watch it without commentary. But the full shows will always have commentary.
That's good. I know a lot of people like it better with, and I even seen, and I think it was in the Ultimate Redemption live stream, somebody saying something about redoing Biddy 4 and adding commentary to it.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I think people are enjoying post commentary.
Yeah, I think it seems like a lot better. I mean, it was interesting back watching back and seeing like Zach sitting off on it at a table and doing commentary, but you still
Which
you can hear it a lot better this way.
I mean, I can't spoil. I can't spoil too much of our future plans, but we're trying to keep them under lock and key.
No problem.
But some of the stuff that we've got coming in the future, we may eventually be doing live commentary. Kind of how we, but it's gonna be kind of like it'll kind of be like you're watching Monday Night Raw, where everything is still clear as day, and you're not gonna hear any mumbo jumbo in the back. But yeah, I can't really touch on that too much without giving it away.
We want to do that. All right. Move on. What do you feel like your future is, both independent wise and VTW wise, going forward?
Okay. Future. I know. As whenever the first thing I think of whenever I hear future is the upcoming stuff with VTW. I will say what you're seeing now, a year, 2 years, 3 years in the future, going to look completely different. I'm just going ahead and put that on the table.
Well then,
I'll leave everybody's minds to wander on that. So like right now, my future really lies on VTW and the VTW product and like all of our partners that we've got. That's where you're going to be able to see like the best version of myself. As far as the indies go, I'm sure you've seen I've kind of taken a backseat. I don't take bookings as often as I used to. I know I've got a match coming up this weekend. But that's not for ACCW. But at the moment, the only indie that I'm working is ACCW. Because the skinny dudes with attitudes are back. So I'm basically, that's basically my indie role at the moment because.
Well, to touch on that match you mentioned you got this weekend, it's actually a VTW YouTube Championship match. So.
Yep. We actually partnered with that company, and they're going to allow us to defend VTW championships on their show. So
it's nice.
So it's going to be kind of cool to see a VTW championship defended on an independent show.
Right.
Which I'll go ahead and say this: that match will be one of the first matches that we post on the VTW Extra channel.
Oh, nice.
So everyone will be able to watch that match.
Yeah. For anybody who doesn't know, that's yourself, Jacob Ryan, the champion, and Ecstatic, I believe, was the third person in there.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
Then another VTW match that's happening on that show is Zach Daniels is wrestling Cynic for the first time ever.
Yes, I did see that.
I think we're gonna try to put that match up on the Extra channel as well.
Yeah, Cynic had been posting on Instagram that this match means a hell of a lot to him. So
I hate to say this, I think I'm looking more forward to that match than the YouTube Championship match, because I mean it's a match that's not happened in the whole 8 years that we've known Cynic, Jason Atlas.
Yeah, that is interesting.
But I can.
No, go ahead.
But futures in wrestling, definitely keep watching the VTW product and how it's going to progress, even from June until December, going into next year. I mean, I know I've only probably talked about this much VTW, like current stuff, but we've got literally this much, like plans for the future and how to make the product better and where we're gonna do the product, who we're gonna bring in, who we're gonna partner with and do all this stuff. I mean, and I will say this, and I'll be the first. I'll say this publicly first. Whenever I decide to call it quits with wrestling, my final match will be in VTW.
Oh wow.
So that's not anytime soon. God forbid, it ain't anytime soon. But at least for the foreseeable future, I can go on ahead and 100% confirm that my final match will be in VTW.
Nice. No. Do you see you guys bringing in more people from other feds at some point? I mean, you got a few guys that we see in from DBW. Navan comes in every once in a while from NUW. We haven't really seen that many guys from NUW lately. Do you see some of those guys perhaps, and more maybe UWE guys coming in at some point, like Everett Freed, Cynic, of course, originally from there?
Oh yeah, we've definitely got a list of guys who are just waiting to be brought in.
Mhm.
The guys that we brought in right now, like you got your VTW guys, which is the OG4, me, myself, Zach, Ecstatic, and Aaron. Then you got D-Lock and Jacob, which are kind of in with the OG4. And then you got D'Lo Smith. He's a VTW original.
Yeah.
Then you got these what I would say is we got the hand-picked DBW people.
Mhm.
So we brought in Asher Christ, Ace Christian, Chase Wakefield.
Yep.
We brought in those guys, and along with Zach Xander. I know Zach Xander doesn't really work at DBW anymore, but he's kind of a DBW guy.
Right.
We've brought in those guys as a part of our core roster.
Right.
So you can expect those guys, at least one of those guys, every single show.
Okay.
Unless if something goes wrong, we can't get them. You can probably expect one of those four guys to be on every single show. There's a couple NUW guys we're looking out for that we've got written down to bring in at some point. There's a couple indie guys that we actually want to bring in.
Okay.
And I know sometime in the future, this kind of falls on stuff that I can't really publicly talk about right now.
Right.
But there's plans to actually bring in some bigger names into VTW.
Yeah. Okay.
Like I was like, it's people that people would never expect to be wrestling for VTW.
Something to look forward to.
But yeah, we've definitely got a lot of future stuff.
Slick Gibson
Slick Gibson's gonna have to come back just for a segment or something.
Right.
I don't know. Here in sometime before the end of the year, I might plan a little Easter egg somewhere in an episode.
There we go.
Yeah. But definitely a lot of stuff to look forward to. Me personally, I'm looking forward to the stuff that I'm involved in. That I know of at the moment. And just the VTW product in general. I know I'm kind of like on screen. I was kind of the guy, but I'm definitely like I'm the guy who produces the episodes and the graphics and I'm the one who puts together the shows and does all that stuff. So with the plans that we've got for the future, I'm definitely looking forward to what all we've got coming in the future.
Nice. Slick Gibson will head JHI to take over VTW once again. Mark my words. Well, I mean, you'd have to get Drew back to have JHI return. So
You have to get Joe Cool and Diablo.
Yep. All right. So I got this fun little segment that I like doing with everybody on here.
Okay.
I'm going to do 2 different versions of it, though. Job 1, fire 1, push 1. I'm going to give you 3 names. You tell me who would do each of those 3. So the first one, I'm going to do the OGs.
Okay.
Zach Daniels, Ecstatic, and Aaron Jones. Who you jobbing? Who you firing? Who you pushing?
Well, shoot, I have to do it. I'll go storyline with this.
Whichever way you want to do it.
I'll fire Aaron Jones. Then I'll push Ecstatic and I'll job Zach Daniels.
Oh, that's an interesting way to put it. So the other 3 names I'm going to throw out there, 3 guys that are newer to VTW. Let's put Jacob Bryan,
Okay.
Zach Xander, and Ace Christian.
I'll do.
I know, not easy, right?
Yeah, that one's hard. I'll fire Jacob Bryan. I will job out Zach Xander and I will push Ace Christian.
Wow, nice. Those are interesting takes. All right, that's one of the 2. I didn't put it there. I haven't really done it a whole lot with some of the newer ones that I've had on here. It's been 2 years since I've done an interview with anybody really on here, but I used to do an elimination chamber. We're going to put this as a Money in the Bank. I know I kind of tried to stay away from that because that's how they used to do it on the Backyard Wrestling Fix back in the day, but it's been so long since that's been around.
Yeah.
Tell me who would be 6 guys, whether you want to do from Backyard or from Indies or Pro, that would be in a Money in the Bank ladder match with you. Who would be those other 5 guys in there with you? Who would you last dump off the ladder to win the match? And then who would you cash in from there?
So are we doing this VTW or like
you can do it VTW, that's fine.
They're like, yeah, I'll probably keep it. I'll keep it VTW.
That's fine.
And I'll throw in. I might throw in a couple names that I would like to see in VTW eventually. So I'll do the current. I'll make sure it doesn't run in with the current champions. So Jacob Bryan's current YouTube champion.
Right.
Zach Daniels is current world champion. Money in the Bank, 5 people. Am I in that one too, or is it 6 people with me?
You're the 6th person, yeah.
Okay. I would do Asher Christ, Ace Christian, do Zach Xander. What am I gonna do? I'll bring in Yankee.
Nice.
Then, you know what? This is my all-time dream match. I'll bring in James Ellsworth.
Alrighty. That was definitely one not expected. So who you dumping off the ladder last to win the match?
James Ellsworth.
Of course. Then the cash in.
So see, I've had a pretty good run with the YouTube championship. So I would probably say I'd cash in on Zach Daniels for the world championship.
Nice. Off of that, before I go into my last question or 2 here, we've seen multiple other titles in VTW in the past, the tag team titles, the X Factor title, to name a couple. Do you think there'll be any more titles brought in at some point in time into VTW besides the world and YouTube?
Where it stands right now with our current roster, no. But I'm not taking that off of the table for the future.
Nice.
Like I'm not going to take it off the table that we might not bring in another championship, or we might not bring back the tag team championships and all that stuff. But I just know in current plans, there isn't any plans at the moment to bring in anything besides the YouTube or the VTW.
I would say with the roster you got, it's probably a good thing just to have the two at the moment.
Yeah.
So, that we've seen. All right. So you kind of answered this one a little bit there. Any dream opponents in BYW, the Indies, or pro wrestling?
So as far as so I'll do them. I'll start BYW first.
Mhm.
I'll talk about people like in the community. There's 3 guys who I have not ever had a chance to work that I would love to get a chance to work eventually. One of these guys is actually still wrestling at the moment. The other 2, not so much. I'll go ahead and say the 2 that's not so much. I would love to work Rick Rios, and I would love to work TJ Sakara.
Nice.
The other one that is actually still wrestling is Corey Graves. Never got a chance to work him in any time in VTW or DBW. Never had a chance to work him. So I would love to eventually work him. My all-time like dream match ever since I've seen him was the Goobah versus James Ellsworth. That's a match that I've always wanted. I'm going to say this. It's a match that I've always wanted. It's a match that I'm going to get eventually. Bank on it. The only way I won't get it is if he just stops wrestling. I'm getting that match one way or another.
Nice.
No matter if it's on the Indies, no matter if it's on VTW, that match will happen. So yeah, James Ellsworth's definitely a guy who I want to wrestle. Honestly, there's a lot of guys on the current VTW roster that I haven't got a chance to wrestle in the ring yet.
Right.
I know. I know. I know. I'm gonna hear it from Jacob Ryan about me firing him earlier. But he's actually one guy who I'm looking forward to wrestling him this weekend. At the independent show that we're working.
Right.
Really looking forward to wrestling him. D-Lock's another guy who I want to wrestle in the ring one day. We've only had one match the entire history of VTW.
Crazy.
He's definitely a guy who I want to wrestle. I've wrestled him in a tag match. I really want to wrestle Asher Christ. Going back, I know Chase Wakefield said something earlier about what the favorite Bad Sons match was. My favorite Bad Sons match that we ever done was the Bad Sons versus Adam Anderson and Mr. Judgment.
Over in DBW.
That was my favorite Bad Sons match we ever done.
Wow.
I know that just popped up in my head.
Yeah, I was gonna get back to it. I completely forgot about it. So.
But yeah, that was my favorite Bad Sons match. Asher Christ is a guy who I really want to work one-on-one and shoot like. And then you got the younger. I'd say the younger guys like Ace Christian, Zach Xander, and Chase Wakefield. I've wrestled Chase or Adam Anderson on like a dark match one time, one-on-one, but I don't think it ever surfaced. I've never wrestled Ace Christian, the Blaze. Never wrestled him. I've wrestled Zach Xander I actually wrestled Zach Xander on the Indies. And then I've wrestled him Best in the Yard 4.
Right.
And then D'Lo Smith. I want to run it back with him eventually. And then of course, there's guys who that we've got on a list that we haven't brought into VTW yet. I'm not going to say their name, but that I would love to work. I'm just down to wrestle anybody. If it's under the VTW banner, bring it on. I'll wrestle anybody.
Nice. Right. That pretty much answers all that. Yeah, like I said, I was gonna get back to that, and I went completely off track from what from him asking about the Bad Sons' favorite matches. There was something I had in mind there. Of course, you guys got Yard Days coming up Sunday, next week, Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
Got a couple matches announced for that show. Jacob Ryan defending the YouTube title against Asher Christ, Zach Daniels, and D-Lock in a huge match for the world title.
Mm-hmm.
D'Lo agrees with your rematch at some point, apparently. Yep. Giving me the eyes. I'm sure we'll find out what you'll be doing or not doing for that show here in the near future.
You'll see.
Right. It seems like a lot of people, I know there's some people that weren't able to make it to the Yard Days taping that you guys did. So we'll see who else is involved and who's not. Is there any last things that you can think of that you want to touch on? I'm trying to think of certain things here.
Just for everybody that's watching, support Tony, support VTW, support the Goobah. There's a lot of good stuff coming up. Like I wish I could really go into detail about all the good stuff we got coming up, but yeah, at the moment, VTW is like my wrestling passion that I've got right now. I'm ready to make it look as professional as possible. I'm wanting to bring in, some new fresh faces. So it's not just the same people over and over again. And everybody on the VTW crew is doing an amazing job.
That is a good question. Are there any feds in the community that you wish to travel to?
Well, I know earlier this year I traveled to DBW, and going to DBW is always fun. So support DBW. I mean, they got a lot of good guys coming out of there. I wouldn't mind eventually working for NFW, Charles' company,
right?
That he's got. I wouldn't mind, working out. I haven't really got a chance to really publicly speak about it, but I mean, I'll dig what they're doing with the whole cinematic stuff. I'm a big cinematic person. So I mean, if I was to say, if I could, make an appearance there, I would go up there to, film some stuff with them.
Nice.
So DBW, NFW. To be honest, I think that's like the only. I mean, the community's kind of died off a little bit, since UWE's not around, KBW's not around. There's not a lot of really companies that are going around.
Revenge of the Storm if you went to NFW.
It could happen. NFW, Jason Walker, if you're listening, I'm down to.
I know he needs like UWF. Right?
Do what?
UW really showed me their stuff.
Yeah,
I know my internet is going again. You got me?
Yeah.
All right. I know NUW doesn't really post that much. They're still doing shows, but they don't really. Post that
See,
much
I think.
now.
Yeah, see, I know since they're not really posting their shows and stuff like that, I kind of consider them kind of like an indie at that point. I wouldn't mind going up to NUW eventually.
Right.
working for them again. I wish they would post. I wish that they would post their shows. I mean, that'd be pretty cool to watch.
I believe they plan on it at some point, but we'll see what happens with that. I personally have to thank you guys for coming back because you guys give me something to do on here now too. So
Yeah.
besides just WWE or AEW, so
I mean, we're having a lot of fun doing it. And it seems like everybody's enjoying it.
Right. We just saw something to do. All right. Well, if anybody's got anything else they want to add to the comment section, I'll give them a couple minutes here. Pretty much ran over everything that I've got in mind, though, otherwise. What has been, not counting the Aaron Jones match at Ultimate Redemption, what would you say is probably your favorite match out of the 5 shows that we've seen so far back? I mean, you only had a couple matches, I guess, but still.
Yeah. I really enjoyed Zach Daniels and Ecstatic. Really enjoyed that match. Overall, I mean, I enjoyed all of Ultimate Redemption. I mean, I could go on and on about everything that's like that was. I'll say Ultimate Redemption was an animal in itself.
Right.
But if I was, other than that, the Pot of Gold ladder match, it sticks out. The Love Sucks street fight with D-Lock and Jacob, that kind of cemented them as like VTW born and bled superstars in that match. And then you had the like all of Aaron's squash matches stick out to me.
Yeah.
A very underrated match that not a lot of people talk about, but me and a lot of other guys gave high praise to was the Jacob Ryan and D'Lo match. That match, those two guys worked.
Then you may have your answer.
I'm in for it. Give me some time in advance, and I may have to make that trip.
But yeah, you were saying about the D'Lo and Jacob Ryan.
D'Lo and Jacob, I mean, they worked amazing together. I think that was a good first opponent for D'Lo to come back to.
Yeah.
I mean, both guys look great coming out of it.
Right.
But yeah, I was gonna say that's probably like the matches that really stick out to me. Going forward with VTW and all that stuff.
Yeah. So you brought it up. We keep talking about it. I thought about it earlier. Got to mention it now. Ultimate Redemption. We all know that was a UWE thing back in the day. What went into your guys' decision to bring it into the fold for VTW? And I mean, I would have to assume Everett had to play a little bit to do with it as well.
So we had spoken to Everett, whenever we were trying to rebrand VTW and, do everything, new going forward. 'Cause I mean, of course, it would be, cool to have VTW Mania back and to do all that stuff. But I mean, we were just thinking of new ways that like we could bring in nostalgia and all that stuff. And we're like, well, UWE gave us a lot. So what about we use their WrestleMania as our WrestleMania since they're not running anymore?
Mm-hmm.
And then like just the name Ultimate Redemption. I mean, that screams WrestleMania.
Yeah, it does.
So I mean, that's basically what that's how we brought in Ultimate Redemption to be our new VTW Mania.
Nice. One last thing, the insert name here video package that you and Zach did. How much fun was that? And do you think we'll see something like that again?
Oh yeah, for sure. Like we're always trying to think of creative ways to, bring like just silliness to our show. That's why the whole insert name here thing was, because like realistically, whenever we were coming up with the calendar back in January, we were coming up with the calendar. We could not think of a show for April, and so like we were sitting there thinking, we're like, what about we just call it insert name here, and we have like a little like notebook style theme to the show. And I mean, I had a lot of fun, recording and editing all that stuff.
Yeah. It came across that you guys are having fun doing that. So.
Oh yeah.
All right.
I have to go in here for 1 second. If anybody's got any questions, put them in the comments right now. I'll be right back.
Yep. I'm just going to finish off the show. So, any last questions or comments? Time now. Show. We get a little dead air here for a second. If I can find it. So many guys from VTW now that haven't been on the show that I might have to think about bringing on here. Or bringing back for some of the people. Oops.
Oh yeah, I've returned.
All right. So I figured I'd show off a little bit of the yard days stuff there while we're waiting. Okay. So, mentioned you got yard days coming up next week, Sunday. I'll do my. Ooh. That could be an interesting day. Anyway, that being the same day as AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling's show. Of course, Sundays. I like that. All right. Maybe I'll try to get a prediction show in some point before then, once we know the final card or majority of it. But we'll see. It doesn't seem like anybody else has any more questions or comments. So at this point, I'll say thanks, everybody, for being in the comment section. Enjoy having people active and keeping the chat going, comments, everything. Tyler, thank you for coming on here. Again, long overdue.
Oh, yeah.
Much appreciated. Keep up the good work in VTW with everything. With that, you got any last thing you want to put out there? Go for it. Otherwise, we're going to close out the show.
I think we've covered everything.
Sounds good. All right. We'll catch you guys the next one.